go through the night. Many places will have a dry night. Still a fair few showers around this evening over Wales and northeast England, but they should tend to fade. And then later in the nights we could see thickening cloud into South Wales and southwest England, a bit of showery rain coming in here too. But with clear skies for Northern Ireland and Scotland, temperatures will dip well down into single figures, not far off freezing in parts of Scotland. It won't be as cold in the south because there'll be more cloud coming in here, and that is a sign of more wet weather to come in as we go through tomorrow. Showery rain initially, but turning more persistent come the afternoon over South Wales and southwest England. A few showers over northern England and southern Scotland, but much of the north will have a dry and a fine day tomorrow. We should see some sunny spells, but staying on the chilly side here. Bye for now.
That warm feeling inside from Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Good luck.
The Britain I grew up in was the most peaceful, gentle society that has ever existed. That has been destroyed.
Opinion polls show immigration is the #1 concern to the British public.
Are you proud to be British?
Yeah, I'm ever so proud.
My name is Stephen Edgington, and in this documentary, I want to find out how Britain became a nation of immigrants. Immigration, the truth, available at gbnews.com.
It's Patrick Christie's Tonight, and here we do things differently.
It's explaining the absolute madness of this, doesn't it?
It's explosive.
I mean, this is very good.
It's lively.
850. Your government sat there short and it did nothing.
It's controversial.
And the Middle East has been in turmoil since before I was born.
It's everything you need to kickstart your evening.
Everyone's had their Weetabix tonight. I love to see it.
That's Patrick Christie's Tonight, weeknights from 9 p.m. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Tune in to Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan. GB News royalty with your perfect start to the weekend. Lucky us! Feisty and fearless guests.
Well, I'm a normal person, so ask me.
Honest opinions.
That raises more questions than a Gary Barlow tax return.
And a few surprises along the way.
Might be cold in the studio.
That is Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan. 8 to 9, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Are the newspapers getting you down?
My wife didn't divorce me that month.
Struggling to separate the wheat from the chaff?
I know that it's a bit of a circus at the best of times.
Well, don't worry. Headliners has got you covered. We'll take the burden of reading the day's news, and if we get depressed, who cares? It's an occupational hazard, frankly. That's Headliners on GB News from 11 p.m. till midnight, and the following morning, 5 till 6 a.m. on GB News, the comedy channel. Nah, just kidding. Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, Britain. It's 12 o'clock on Tuesday, the 24th of September. I'm Emily Carver.
And I'm Tom Harwood, live from the Labour Party conference today in Liverpool, where leader Sir Keir Starmer will be speaking in just 2 hours. Stay tuned to hear what the Labour leader has to say.
Yes, indeed. And the Home Secretary, she's had her say. Yvette Cooper calls the Conservatives and Reform right-wing wreckers, accusing them of making excuses for the mob following the summer riots. And she says Labour will continue to back the police. The National Trust's Director General has admitted that 70% of his staff hate the union flag and are progressive activists. Are you surprised? And a judge has ruled that Prince Harry's US visa application should remain private, despite him admitting to taking drugs in his memoir Spare. Our royal reporter will tell us all. Well, Tom, it's the main event today at 2 o'clock. Keir Starmer will be taking to the stage. What's the mood like? How are people feeling there?
Yeah, it's interesting. It's felt like it's been a bit of an uneasy conference in many ways. It's rained most days, so we've had damp delegates trudging around the conference hall, and then that's sort of matched by the dampened performance of the opinion polls for this party. But we've also had moments where cabinet ministers have attempted to lift the mood, spread some positivity. We saw the forced smile from the Chancellor, Rachel Reeves, yesterday, and it's likely that we will see see some positivity trying to be emanated from the Prime Minister's speech as well. Also, a word or two on migration, which he'll promise to bring down, saying he's not intensely relaxed about the high levels of migration this country has experienced.
Not intensely relaxed. Well, there you go. Thank you very much indeed, Tom Harwood. And please do get in touch at home if you're watching. gbnews.com/your say is the way to do so. But let's get the news headlines with Sam Francis.
Very good afternoon to you. It's 2 minutes past 12. The top story from the newsroom this lunchtime. The Home Secretary says Labour is the party of law and order, vowing to crack down on street crime, targeting offenders like street drinkers and shoplifters. Opening the third day of the Labour conference in Liverpool, Yvette Cooper pledged to introduce Ronan's Law, banning ninja swords. That earned her a standing ovation. She also promised buffer zones around abortion clinics and reiterated Labour's plan to halve knife crime in a decade. She went on to condemn riots in Southport after the deaths of 3 girls, calling the violence a disgrace, and slammed the Conservatives as right-wing wreckers who sow division. Well, light at the end of the tunnel. That's the message from Sir Keir Starmer as he prepares for his first Labour conference speech as Prime Minister in around 2 hours' time. He'll outline a vision for national renewal, focusing on faster economic growth, shorter hospital waiting lists and safer streets, but will also warn of tough short-term pressures ahead. The Labour leader will also pledge a crackdown on benefit fraud, a reduction in net migration and the introduction of a Hillsborough law. The speech, though, comes amid anger over cuts to winter fuel payments and scrutiny of donations to senior Labour figures. The government says securing an agreement with striking nurses is an essential step to restoring public services. That's after they yesterday turned down a 5.5% pay rise. 2/3 of Royal College of Nursing members voted against the deal in a record turnout of 145,000. Labour Minister Pat McFadden insists the government understands the challenge of balancing public spending while trying to treat workers fairly.
Prospects for the country are great. Britain's a great place in which to invest, and if we can get that message out and get that going, then we can generate the wealth that we need to make people better off and to fund the public services that we all depend on. And the 2 parts to that story are going to be at the heart of the Prime Minister's speech this afternoon.
However, the Shadow Health Secretary Victoria Adkins claims the Labour government has lost control of public sector pay. And she told us this morning that pay rises given to junior doctors could have repercussions for nurses and other healthcare professionals.
It would have impacts on other healthcare professionals, including nurses and midwives, who would ask quite reasonably, well, what value does this government put on us? And we are now seeing the longer-term consequences of that short-term decision he made in July to award that inflation-busting pay rise to junior doctors with no reform, such as I had with consultants, no improvements to productivity, and sadly, we're now seeing the ramifications of that.
Well, we'll just quickly return to the Labour conference in Liverpool. We're hearing in the last few minutes, in fact, that 2 Youth Demand supporters have taken action at that conference by painting the words Genocide Conference on the front entrance. Pictures here, you should be able to see where that Youth Demand protest has taken place, calling for a 2-way arms embargo on Israel. They're also calling on the new Labour government to halt any new oil and gas licences granted since 2021. That took place just over an hour ago as those 2 supporters walked up to the security check-in building where guests have to pass through before attending the conference being held in Liverpool. And as I say, sprayed those words, Genocide Conference, onto the side of that building before they were, we understand, tackled by police officers and later arrested. In other news, the Foreign Secretary has joined world leaders today calling for an immediate ceasefire between Israel and Lebanon as the death toll from Israeli airstrikes targeting Hezbollah has now surpassed 550. That includes 50 children. 500,000 people have now fled southern Lebanon as the country's health minister confirmed those deaths and over 1,600 injuries from the strikes. It's been the deadliest barrage since the war between Israel and Hezbollah in 2006. In response, Lebanon's fired 55 rockets into northern Israel overnight, wounding several people. And the UK has also advised British nationals to leave the area immediately, with David Lammy warning that any further escalation could, he says, have devastating consequences. A global IT outage in July is back in the spotlight today as CrowdStrike's senior executive faces lawmakers in the US. Adam Myers will testify before a US subcommittee later to explain how a faulty software update caused widespread disruption for businesses around the world, including aeroplanes and hospitals. The Texas-based firm has since apologised for what is now regarded as the worst blunder in IT history, saying a fix was quickly deployed and promising full transparency. Here, commuters are bracing for more disruption as dozens of flood warnings are still in place across the UK, with more heavy rain on the way. Some areas have seen more than a month's worth of rain in just 24 hours, leaving homes damaged and roads impassable. A new yellow weather warning's been issued for Thursday, stretching from Nottinghamshire to Northumberland, with 100 millimetres of rain expected in some areas. The Environment Agency's also issued a number of flood warnings. That's the highest alert level, with strong winds expected across the Pennines and the North York Moors. And finally, take a look at this. A skydiver has pulled off a world-first stunt combining skydiving and surfing in Abu Dhabi. Sebastian Alvarez jumped from the helicopter with a surfboard strapped to his feet, landing directly on the water. Video you can see here shows that incredible feat, with Alvarez releasing his parachute mid-air and then riding the waves. The adrenaline junkies called the achievement a lifelong dream, blending his love of both skydiving and surfing. Those are the latest headlines for now. I'll be back with you just after 12:30.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Welcome back to Good Afternoon Britain with me, Emily Carver. Well, it's a big day for the Prime Minister, a big day for the Labour Party. The context for this speech this afternoon, we're just gearing up towards it. It's going to happen at about 2 o'clock. What exactly is he going to say to the nation? There's Donorgate, Wardrobegate, Freebiegate all going on in the background. You've got his personal approval ratings plummeting to their lowest ever. You've also got criticism that he's been far too miserable with previous speeches, talking the country down to some extent. But let's cross live to Liverpool now, because Tom Harwood is going to join us from the Labour Party conference. Tom, thank you very much indeed. What can we expect today?
Well, it will be just inside this hall where the Prime Minister will make his speech, the same hall where he spoke last year. And I think we'll all remember, how can we forget? Last year his speech started with something fairly memorable. A member of the audience running up and dousing the then leader of the opposition in glitter. He had to then take off his jacket and continue with the speech, sleeves rolled up. Now the big question mark will be, will there be that sort of issue again? Could there be more protesters at Keir Starmer's speech? There certainly were a couple at Rachel Reeves' speech. That'll be something to look out for inside the hall. But also, of course, he's going to be trying to deal with big themes. We're going to hear a line on migration. We're going to hear stuff about crime. Law and order will be a key theme in this speech, so we're told. Crucially, we'll be looking out for policy. Will the Prime Minister be putting forward clear and identifiable policy to try and move forward, really, some of the negative news agenda that has weighed this conference down to some extent? The stories about gifts, the scandals about donations. Can he put that behind him? Can he even afford to make light of it, perhaps? These are questions all hanging over the Prime Minister's speech, which, of course, as you say, is now under 2 hours' time.
May address in one way or another the row over freebies, the row over wardrobes being bought and tickets and holidays and apartments. Is there any chance he might?
Well, I think it's a very difficult line to balance. Obviously, if the Prime Minister opens with a joke about whether or not he paid for his glasses or his suit, it drags that scandal back to the fore. I think it would probably be inopportune for the Prime Minister to make such a joke, although obviously it might be very funny. It would have the negative effect of dragging that story back to the forefront, dragging that story back to the top of the headlines. I think he'll probably want to put it behind him, move forward, and crucially make some announcements on policy. That's one way to move the story on.
Thank you very much indeed. Tom Harwood there outside the big speech conference hall at Labour Party conference in Liverpool. Thank you very much indeed. We await to see what we can expect from Keir Starmer. But yes, he's going to be talking a little bit about migration, how he wants to get that down, how it trebled under the Conservatives. He's also going to be talking about a new law, the Hillsborough Law, which will put a duty of candour on various authorities and the like to help prevent those types of events from ever happening again. And there'll be lots about how it's going to be difficult times before it can get better, but he's going to try and put a positive spin on what he's previously said, which reportedly, well, we've seen a lot of it, has actually had a massive impact on the economy in terms of consumer confidence, business investment. If you talk down the country too much, people will change their behaviour and become a little more cautious. But I believe we're going to cross back to Liverpool because GB News' Gloria De Piero is joined by the Labour MP for Stoke-on-Trent Central, Gareth Snell. Thank you very much indeed, Gloria.
Emily, pleasure to see you as ever. Gareth Snell, my former colleague, a pleasure to see you. Now, you lost your seat, Stoke-on-Trent Central, in 2019. You're back this time. But is your party, is this government giving you enough positivity to make you think that you'll hold on next time?
I mean, yes, I think they are. But it's my job to try and hold my seat as much as the government's. But look, we promised change. Yes. People, that resonated with people in communities like Stoke-on-Trent. They saw the Labour Party had changed, and now I'm confident that what I've seen at this conference, what I've heard from Rachel yesterday, what I think we'll hear from Keir this afternoon, that change will begin, and I'll be able to demonstrate to my electorate that the faith they put in me and the Labour Party was not misplaced.
You know, I'm struggling to understand really what the story of this government is. I'm not clear about who you are, who you stand for. I hear lots about tough decisions, but it just feels a bit gloomy.
Well, look, we are 11 weeks into what is going to be a 5-year parliament. As you know, we inherited a 20 billion black hole. We have got an economic problem that we are working hard to solve. But we also do need to deliver on that change. We need to give people that hope and that optimism that the things they voted for, the things they told me on the doorstep that they wanted to see in their community, in their neighbourhoods, are able to be delivered. And I'm confident with what I heard from Rachel yesterday, what I know we're going to get from Keir today, that change that we promised will be here. That's public service investment, that is making sure that people's lives are better off, it's tackling those root causes of the cost of living crisis so that when we get to the next election, people are genuinely better off than they were at the last.
Now, you represent one of those seats, like the seat that I used to represent, what became known as the Red Wall, very heavy Brexit supporting constituencies. Like many of those constituencies, Reform is in second place in Stoke-on-Trent Central. Are you worried about them?
I'm not worried about them, but I do think we have to take them very seriously. They are not a joke outfit. They are not to be ridiculed. Thousands of people in my own constituency looked at what was on offer and chose to vote for Reform. I take that very seriously. It's my job to convince those voters at the next election that their trust is best placed in the Labour Party. But to do that, we have to understand that Reform are becoming a mature campaigning political party, and we must treat them as such, and then campaign against them and against the things that they are advocating for in the same way we would the Conservatives or the Liberal Democrats. We can't simply write them off as a flash in the pan. That would be a dangerous thing to do.
Cutting the winter fuel payment is surely a gift to Reform. You must have had, I remember the MP's email inbox. It's not nice reading, I'm sure.
No, it's not. And you know, I think that people are genuinely worried, but there is a job of work that I, as a local MP, and the government has to do to explain to people the other sources of help they can get, whether that's the household support fund, the Warm Homes grant, those sorts of things. And ultimately, there are going to be other tough decisions ahead of us, so we need to make sure that we're explaining why we're doing it and then give that clear indication that we're doing this because the future will be brighter, will be better, and that there is going to be, as Keir keeps saying, a short-term pain for a long-term gain in our country and our communities.
Gareth Snell, pleasure to chat to you again. Thank you for being on GB News. Enjoy the rest of the conference. Emily, the big day. Couple of hours, we'll be taking it live, of course.
It is indeed a big day. Thank you very much indeed, Gloria Pereiro, for bringing us that fantastic interview with Gareth Snell, who is the MP for Stoke-on-Trent Central. We've got lots more coming up on the show.
I think we are clear.
Thank you very much indeed. This is Good Afternoon Britain on GB News. We've got lots more coming up on today's show. Now, the Home Secretary, a little bit earlier, she gave a speech. She came to the stage. She said Labour is the party of law and order. She vowed to crack down on street crime. She also lashed out at right-wing parties. She says they made excuses for the mob following the summer riots. Did they? Our security editor Mark White will bring us the latest.
This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
More than half of people aged 50 and over feel happier from having a friendship, and 46% feel a sense of belonging too. Tomorrow is the start of Friendship Month. The Oddfellows, a non-profit friendly society that provides older adults with opportunities to create new friendships, is now inviting more people this September to join their local groups and expand their friendship circles through giving a taster activity at local community centres. We're joined now by Jane Nelson, who's the CEO of Oddfellows. Good morning, Jane. Thanks for joining us. As someone in my mid-30s, I've even noticed as well that my own friendship group has diminished over the years as kind of, you know, people get married and have kids and they kind of drift apart and don't make time for each other.
How important is it to have friends separate to your family? What benefit does that bring you?
As you do get older, you do lose friends for a variety of reasons. Either you lose touch or they have an illness or they pass away as you get older. The stats show that people love spending time with their friends. It always takes somebody, doesn't it? Somebody's got to make that first step to send a text to say, do you fancy meeting up for coffee, or do you fancy going to the pub, or whatever the arrangement's going to be. But sometimes somebody always has to make that first step and text or phone. And I think the other key thing is it usually tends to be the same person, but that doesn't matter as long as that connectivity is made, because that's what you need. You need the connectivity. If you think about when we were children, we'd go around the playground and say, will you be my friend? Well, we don't tend to do that as we get older. But be brave, look on Oddfellows website, see all the amazing events we've got on, go to see what's going on in your area, oddfellows.co.uk, or you can telephone 0800 028 1810, and our team will be more than happy to point them in the right direction of their local events, and there's so much going on, 300 going on.
GB News, the People's Channel.
If you want your news to be straight talking...
This is a nightmare for the Conservatives again.
Down to earth.
It's not just Nottingham where this is happening, is it?
And most importantly, honest.
Hard-working, middle-class taxpayers, they'll get their book thrown at them.
Then catch me, Martin Daubney, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
The king of breakfast TV is back. That's right, Britain's favourite TV host, Eamon Holmes, returns to Britain's hottest breakfast programme. Breakfast every day from 6 a.m. only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
We're proud to be GB News, the People's Channel, and as you know, we always love to hear your views. Now, there's a new way of getting in touch with us at gbnews.com/yoursay. By commenting, you can be part of a live conversation and join our GB News community. You can even talk to me, Bev Turner, or any of the members of the GB News family.
OK, welcome back. It is now 12:20. Now, the Home Secretary, Yvette Cooper, she says it's time to take our streets back. She addressed concerns on crime at the Labour conference in Liverpool a little bit earlier on. Now, speaking about the summer riots, she described the events as arson, racism and thuggery. She also turned her attention to right-wing parties, which she called right-wing wreckers, referring to the Conservatives and Reform. She also said some had made excuses for the rioters, made excuses for them. Is that so? Well, we can now speak with GB News Home and Security Editor Mark White. Mark, you were listening to Yvette Cooper's speech there. She covered quite a bit. What were your key takeaways?
Well, wrecking seems to be the word of the day for a speechwriter anyway, also accusing the Conservatives of taking a wrecking ball to law and order. But it was that issue, I think, that stood out for me on the riots, really doubling down on the government's rhetoric at the time of the riots, saying that this was racism and criminality pure and simple, that there was no excuse, nothing else at play here. Of course, I mean, I remember at the time listening to Sir Keir Starmer at a news conference in Downing Street that I was at, where he was talking about this being the far right who were being heading to these locations in trains, and that they were bringing in new laws to allow the police to head them off at the pass, if you like, and be able to intervene. And then we saw in the subsequent criminal cases that went before the courts that the courts that the vast majority of those who were appearing before the courts were people from the local area. But take a listen to what Yvette Cooper said about what she believes was behind the riots and the motivation.
So don't anyone tell me that was protest. Don't anyone tell me that was about immigration or policing or poverty. Plenty of people have strong views on immigration, on crime, on the NHS and more, but they don't pick up bricks and throw them at the police. They don't set light to buildings with people inside. It was arson. It was racism. It was thuggery. It was crime.
Well, as I say, very interesting that she chose to take that particular tack on this issue, given that even, you know, wider afield in the mainstream media now, people are acknowledging the very real tensions in communities right up and down the country because of mass migration, in particular illegal immigration and asylum seekers. But on other issues, which of course went down as we would expect in a Labour conference very well, she said that she was going to tackle knife crime, that Labour was the party of law and order, that there would be more police on the streets, not just on the streets, but in neighbourhoods. Again, take a listen to what she said.
The Labour government will bring in new powers on antisocial behaviour, shoplifting and off-road bikes, and we will put neighbourhood police back in our communities and back on the beat. And yes, after years of co-op and us-door campaigning, this Labour government will introduce a new law on assaults on shop workers, because everyone has the right to work in freedom from fear.
And so in terms of the crackdown, what we're going to see, according to the Home Secretary, is a renewed emphasis really on tackling the kind of antisocial crime that is plaguing many towns and cities across the country. But I think the difficulty going forward on this is trying to get the police to be able to respond to what the government sees as a priority. Chief constables would argue that, you know, the reason that some of the antisocial behaviour and what they see and have dubbed over the years as kind of lower level crime has taken a bit of a back seat is because the police are just dealing with back-to-back calls all of the time, stacking up calls that take an awful long time to be answered in many instances. So where will they be able to actually find the time and the resources to answer these kind of lower level anti-social crime that is being committed in towns and cities across the country?
Yes, Mark, I'm always sceptical when governments talk about new legislation when it appears those things are already illegal. So a new law on shop workers when it comes to assault on shop workers. Of course, any assault on a shop worker is absolutely dreadful. But will a new law make a difference to that? Will that actually enable the police, when we know our criminal justice system is under so much pressure, will that actually enable the police to put these types of people behind bars when we know that our prisons are so full? When they also talk about putting more neighbourhood policing back into our communities, do we know whether we're going to get X thousand more police officers out and about in our communities? A law on spiking. Well, we know spiking is already illegal. You're not allowed to put a substance in someone's drink at a bar or a club or wherever else. Is this just sort of acting when it won't actually make that much of a material difference?
Well, I mean, certainly, I think, to be fair to the government, they have their priorities and they would like to see a focus on these areas. But individual chief constables have to decide and prioritise policing in their force areas. And sometimes they cannot provide the resources to cover the areas that the particular government or minister of the day might see as important. On that first issue about shop workers, you're absolutely right, Emily. Of course, assault is assault. But if you enshrine in law a particular crime of assault against shop workers, it's similar to an assault against emergency service workers. So it's over and above an everyday assault on a member of the public, meaning that the criminal sanction at the end of the day, the penalty at the end of the day, can be that bit higher. On neighbourhood policing, yeah, they may want to recruit another 13,000 officers, but we discovered when the Conservatives wanted to recruit an additional 10,000 officers as well, it was extremely difficult for police forces to be able to find those individuals in the time frame that the Conservatives gave them to do that, and to find them of the sufficient quality. And what was happening, of course, was seasoned, experienced officers were leaving the job, and then lots of very young or inexperienced officers taking their place out in the streets, doing very difficult and complex jobs. And many of them felt they weren't up to the task because there wasn't the mentoring, because many of the experienced officers had left, and then many of them left shortly after that. So there is still a deep crisis within policing that needs to be answered here.
She did speak about immigration, not so much on the detail. She talked about how the disorder and violence we saw during the summer will not silence a serious debate on immigration. Then she goes on to say that net migration has trebled, and she puts this down to the fact that we have not had enough training of young people in this country. So essentially what she's saying, if we improve training for young people in this country, immigration won't be a problem. Does that stack up?
Well, the disorder may not silence debate on immigration, but it's done nothing to enhance the debate on immigration. There really hasn't been much of a debate other than what you say there, Emily, which is, vague discussions about the need to train up businesses of people to be able to fill the jobs that businesses want in this country. But remember as well, you've had an issue where businesses have sought overseas workers for many of the jobs because, regardless of the sort of skill set, often they're lower paid. And from a business point of view, that business model, it makes more sense to employ people that are going to be cheaper in terms of your overall wage bill. So you've got to incentivise the businesses not to be looking constantly overseas for their staff as well.
Well, thank you very much indeed, Mark White, our Home and Security Editor. Thank you. Speak to you in a bit. Well, this is Good Afternoon Britain. We're on GB News. We've got lots more coming up on today's show. We're going to check in back with Tom Harwood at Liverpool conference. Let me know what you think about how we have new laws for different things. So, for example, now assault on a shop worker could lead to a more stringent sentence or a more stringent punishment than assault on someone else who happens not to be a shop worker. Does that make sense to you? It doesn't quite make sense to me, but let me know your thoughts. That after the break.
Very good afternoon to you. It's just after 12:30. A look at the top stories this lunchtime. Well, there's been disruption at the Labour Party conference earlier this morning as two Youth Demand supporters spray-painted the words "Genocide Conference" on the entrance. The protesters calling for an arms embargo on Israel and halt to new UK oil and gas licences were arrested after being tackled by police. The incident happened this morning outside the security check-in at the conference in Liverpool. Meanwhile, ahead of his speech to the Labour conference today, Sir Keir Starmer's insisted that Britain can be fixed. Posting on social media this morning, the Prime Minister said just because Britain isn't working at the moment, it doesn't mean it can't be fixed. His speech, set to begin in around an hour and a half's time, will aim for an optimistic tone, claiming there is light at the end of the tunnel. He'll also outline a vision for national renewal, focusing on faster economic growth, shorter hospital waiting lists and safer streets, but will warn of tough short-term pressures ahead. The speech comes amid anger over cuts to winter fuel payments and scrutiny of donations to senior Labour figures. Israel is ramping up attacks on Hezbollah in Lebanon, with airstrikes and tank fire hitting militants as thousands continue to flee the region. Israel's military chief has, in the last few minutes, said that the offensive will intensify today after 1,600 militant targets have already been struck in just 24 hours. Hezbollah responded with rocket attacks on Israeli military sites, including an airfield and explosives factory. Over 550 people have so far been killed, including 50 children, as Lebanese families pack highways and flee south. Lebanon's government is setting up 89 shelters for 26,000 displaced residents. Here, the government says securing an agreement with striking nurses is an essential step to restoring public services after they turned down a 5.5% pay rise. Two-thirds of Royal College of Nursing members voted against the deal in a record turnout. Labour Minister Pat McFadden insists the government does understand the challenges of balancing public spending while trying to treat workers fairly. But Shadow Health Secretary Victoria Adkins claims the Labour government has lost control of public sector pay. And finally, a skydiver has pulled off a world-first stunt combining skydiving and surfing. Sebastian Alvarez jumped from a helicopter over Abu Dhabi with a surfboard strapped to his feet, landing directly on the water. Video of his incredible feat shows Alvarez releasing his parachute mid-air and then riding the waves. The adrenaline junkie called the achievement a lifelong dream, blending his love of both skydiving and surfing. Those are the latest headlines for now. A full roundup at 1 o'clock.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Time now for your latest weather update from the Met Office here on GB News. Thankfully, it's a lot drier out there today after the recent downpours. It's not completely dry. We do have some wet weather across northern Scotland, where it's also turned colder. This area of low pressure brought all the heavy rain through the weekend and yesterday, but it is ebbing away. As it pulls away, though, it is allowing the winds to come down from the north, hence why it's so chilly across northern Scotland. We do have some pretty wet weather here too. A few showers over southern Scotland and a scattering over parts of northern England and Wales, Northern Ireland also. But for a good part of England, particularly those flood-affected areas, it should be a dry day. Fairly cloudy, but with a bit of brightness, we could get up into the high teens. So generally fine conditions across much of southern England and the Midlands. Maybe one or two showers coming into Devon and Cornwall later on. Northern and western parts of Wales will see some sunny spells, but also a few showers here, a scattering of showers over northern England. These showers over the far north of England, southern Scotland, could be on the heavy side, and the heavy and persistent rain this morning over northeast Scotland, that should ease by the end of the day. But look at that wind coming down from the north, bringing that chillier feel, and that colder air will sink further south as we go through the night. Many places will have a dry night. Still a fair few showers around this evening over Wales and northeast England, but they should tend to fade. And then later in the night, we could see thickening cloud into South Wales and southwest England, a bit of showery rain coming in here too. But with clear skies for Northern Ireland and Scotland, temperatures will dip well down into single figures, not far off freezing in parts of Scotland. Won't be as cold in the south because there'll be more cloud coming in here, and that is a sign of more wet weather to come in as we go through tomorrow. Showery rain initially, but turning more persistent come the afternoon over South Wales and southwest England. A few showers over northern England and southern Scotland, but much of the north will have a dry and a fine day tomorrow. We should see some sunny spells, but staying on the chilly side here. Bye for now.
The latest GB News travel.
Hello, good morning to you. I'm Jules Buckley. South Yorkshire and Warren Vale between Swinton and Rawmarsh. The A633 still closed both ways. A collision is being investigated, so slow either side. Blaby in Leicestershire, the Leicester Road there, the A426 shut between Blaby and the Little Glen Road junction. There's flooding there. There's currently no way through. Somerset, northbound M5 west of Bristol. Portishead at 19 up to the M49 turn off at 18. The 2 lanes are coned off there for emergency repairs. Still queuing on the northbound side. Kempston in Bedfordshire, the A421 between the Marshallese roundabout and the M1 at 13. Closed for flooding, that's queuing. And the Mandeville Road in Northolt in London, the southbound side. Shut between Northolt Station down to Eastcote Lane and queuing. That's due to a collision there. That's the latest.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website, gbnews.com.
OK, well, a judge has ruled that the Duke of Sussex's US visa application should remain private, despite him admitting to taking drugs in his memoir, Spare. Yes, the US judge, Carl Nichols, said the public does not have a strong interest in disclosure of the Duke's immigration records, and added that, like any foreign national, the Duke has a legitimate privacy interest in his immigration status. Curious. We're joined in the studio by GB News royal correspondent Cameron Walker to talk us through this rather odd story. Now, Cameron, this all came from, am I right, this all came from a think tank who were trying to push this. They were trying to make all these documents relating to Prince Harry's visa application, well, they wanted to make them public.
Yeah, exactly. So this is a Washington, D.C.-based think tank, the Heritage Foundation, conservative with a small c. And when Prince Harry disclosed in his memoir Spare that he had taken cocaine, psychedelic mushrooms and marijuana, they thought, well, hold on, he's got a visa to the United States. And usually, if you admit to taking drugs on your visa application, they're going to reject the visa application. So they put a Freedom of Information request into the US government, the Department of Homeland Security, who deals with visa applications, to ask for them to publicly disclose Prince Harry's immigration records, to reveal it. They refused to do so, and therefore the Heritage Foundation sues the US government, and then it's become this massive court case. The Heritage Foundation were basically arguing even that either Prince Harry failed to disclose his drug use on his immigration record, or the US government or officials in the US government turned a blind eye because of Prince Harry's status that, as the king's son. That was kind of the allegation. In fairness, we don't know what kind of visa Prince Harry's on. If he's on a diplomatic visa, for example, there are waivers in which he doesn't need to declare any drug use, potentially, particularly the A1 visa, which is the one, according to a US immigration lawyer, which has spoken to GB News in the past, suggests that members of the royal family would have if they go to the United States. But as you said, the US Judge Carl Nichols says the public does not have a strong interest in the disclosure of the Duke's immigration records, and basically said because Prince Harry in his memoir didn't talk about his immigration status or immigration application in the book, it doesn't actually matter that he's declared that he's taken drugs. And that was kind of the argument. So we're waiting to see if the Heritage Foundation wants to appeal that judge's decision. But at the moment, Prince Harry's safe and sound in the US.
I don't understand that argument from the judge.
Well, I mean, that's what the judge said. I can only tell you what he says. And I'm sure the Heritage Foundation are thinking long and hard about what their next step is going to be, because they say that this could potentially be a clear issue in terms of somebody being not above the law, but having a certain privilege above that of US citizens.
Well, above the law, that is what they're saying, really, isn't it?
Well, I suppose, quite possibly. And I suppose, you know, they want to say that Prince Harry is a member of the royal family, but in the United States, every person is equal, right? Every US citizen is equal. So that's what they're trying to find out.
Yeah, so why are the Heritage Foundation doing this? Is this a vendetta against Prince Harry, or is this them trying to, I don't know, shine a light on discrepancies in how people are treated?
Well, I think they would argue your second point, Emily, but there are certainly commentators online who are saying they are just trying to create a bit of a headache for Prince Harry. Of course, this week, particularly bad timing that all of this is coming out because he's in New York doing a number of charity engagements, and this is clearly distracting from that. And I suppose, you know, the Heritage Foundation is not going to say that they're trying to discredit Prince Harry, but, you know, we'll see.
I mean, no one would really believe that Prince Harry would actually be under threat from being deported from the United States. As a member of the British royal family, OK, he's not a working royal anymore, but just because he mentioned a bit of drug taking in a memoir, a silly thing to do.
Well, exactly. And also, I think the other point is that Prince Harry is not, by any stretch of the imagination, the first high-profile figure to have admitted to taking drugs in the past and then been allowed to enter the United States. So there would be an argument, perhaps, that is Prince Harry a little bit of a victim here and being singled out because he's happened to have written it in his memoir Spare, and he happens to be quite unpopular with the British public at the moment. That could potentially be an argument.
Yeah, I find it very interesting that, well, on the surface, the Heritage Foundation appears to be a sensible, respected, conservative think tank based in Washington, Irene, that they put quite a lot of energy into this particular issue. It's very interesting. I do wonder why.
Well, and money as well, of course, because they've had to pay for lawyers to argue this case. And if you think about it, what would actually happen if the visa application was publicly disclosed and then we got to see exactly what was in it? Prince Harry has left as a working member of the royal family to the United Kingdom. He is now living with his wife Meghan, who is a US citizen, and his 2 young children, who are clearly also US citizens. Would it really be right to split up a very young family because of what their father wrote on their immigration records? I just don't see diplomatically how on earth anybody in the US Department for Homeland Security is going to want to negotiate that with the British government as to where is Prince Harry going to go.
Yeah, I mean, I do understand if the United States has a rule that you don't allow people to come live in the United States if they have taken drugs in the past, then it should be a rule that suits everyone. But I believe that we don't always see that rule applied even-handedly, even when it does not happen, even when Prince Harry isn't in the picture. But this is another victory for Prince Harry, though.
It is potentially another victory, and I think what he's been doing really over the last couple of days is honouring the legacy of his mother. And I did ask Prince Harry's spokespeople for comments on this particular issue, and I was met with silence. I believe their focus is on the Diana Legacy Award, which Prince Harry was attending yesterday. He looked a little bit awkward at the start of it, actually. He was asking some young people questions who'd won this Legacy Award, talking about young people's mental health. He also visited the Halo Trust engagement, talking about, if you remember those iconic pictures of Princess Diana back in 1997 walking through a landmine field in Angola, Prince Harry wanting to continue that work and eradicate landmines across the world. And today, actually, which again would tie into a diplomatic issue with the royal family and members of the elite in the United States, he's meeting Bill Clinton, the former US president, and his daughter Chelsea, for the Clintons' drive to find solutions to global problems. That's how it's been headlined. So Prince Harry's going to be joining them on stage.
Oh, Prince Harry, he's gonna solve all the challenges we face as humankind. Wonderful
stuff. That's what he hopes.
Thank you very much indeed, Cameron Walker. Thank you, GB News royal correspondent. Of course, we'll see if this case rumbles on, what the Heritage Foundation will say. Will they say, no, 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 this certainly is in the public interest. We want to see that visa application. We shall see, I guess. But this is Good Afternoon Britain on GB News. We've got more after the break. We're going to be speaking to Tom Harwood because there's been quite breaking in the last half hour or so. Lots and lots of graffiti calling out Labour for genocide, apparently, at the conference. There's also been quite a bit of anti-Zionist protesters as well at that conference. We'll bring you the latest.
Sunday with Michael Portillo from 11, only on GB News.
On Tuesday, the 3rd of September, at St Paul's Church in Wilton Place in London, a lucky few will sing highlights from Mozart's Don Giovanni in front of a paying audience with an orchestra and under the baton of Gary Matthewman, the conductor and artistic director of Brunswick Vocal Arts. Why is it important that young singers have this opportunity with an orchestra?
There's a gauntlet, if you like, that I think lots of young singers have to run between finishing the relative comfort of their conservatoire education and becoming firmly established as professional singers. Lots of the ones who show real verve and real promise and work really hard end up for a little bit too long being trapped in a kind of cycle of being the understudy. But some of them are ready to kind of go that extra mile and reach that next milestone. And we as a charity thought, well, what a lovely thing it would be to handpick some of these best young singers, give them intensive coaching on the role that they're going to perform, give them the chance to work with professional players for the first time, and crucially, have the thing professionally filmed and recorded. Because the first question all young singers are asked when they meet somebody influential now is, well, what's your website?
You have coached the singer, coaching the singer either towards a recital or towards their performance, their part in an opera. Tell me a little bit about that process.
It's a case of asking them questions which make them bring a character to life, so that when an audience member witnesses this person singing, they don't just think, oh, that's a pretty noise. They think, oh, there's something going on here that I recognise. And especially in a context like this, which is related, I think, to when people sing recitals. Say they sing 20 songs in that one evening. They've got to present 20 roles, 20 mini operatic roles, if you like. And we need to see the change in their bearing. We need to see the change in their approach to the text, as well as to the kind of the technical focus of their singing and how they produce sound.
GB News, the People's Channel.
Hi there, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm going to take a second to tell you all about my show, Dubes & Co. We start off with the issues of the day. We then bring in both sides of the argument. We get rid of the disrespect. And then you throw me into the mix. And trust me, I'll tell it exactly how it is. And then, of course, the magic ingredient, you at home. We mix it all together, and what have we got? In my opinion, the best debate show in town. Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
It's Patrick Christie's Tonight, and here we do things differently. It's explaining the absolute madness of this, doesn't it? It's explosive. I mean, this is very good. It's lively.
850. Your government sat there, Sean, and it did nothing.
It's controversial. And the Middle East has been in turmoil since before I was born. It's everything you need to kickstart your evening. Everyone's had their Weetabix tonight. I love to see it. That's Patrick Christie's Tonight, weeknights from 9 p.m. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
12:48 is the time. You're watching and listening to Good Afternoon Britain, and we're going to cross back to Liverpool and catch up with Tom Harwood, because there's been quite a few anti-Israel protests taking over parts of the conference today. Tom, you've been out and about, and you've demanded, firstly, they've been spraying graffiti over parts of the Labour Party conference with the word genocide, haven't they? But there's also been quite a number of protests against Israel, against Zionists.
Yes, there's a particularly strange sign that has been seen, and we must stress this is outside the conference, not inside the conference. So people protesting the conference just by the entrance. And I believe we can show one of these signs now on the television that says Zionists control the Labour Party, with a big Star of David next to it and sort of blood dripping down. We'll try and get that particular picture up as soon as we can. But yes, Israel murders children, killing kids is not self-defense. These are signs that have been put up by these protesters, but this is the one that I'm talking about. Zionists control the Labour Party. That's the accusation of these two men, and on that sign we saw a Star of David as well. Now, I think most people, most independent observers would say that's a fairly anti-Semitic trope, the idea of Jews and control, and not even the Israeli flag there, but just the Jewish Star of David. Pretty blatant anti-Semitism in my view. I'm going to call it what it is there. Although it must be said, this is outside the Labour Party, not inside the Labour Party. And it must be said that under the previous leadership of this party, you'd probably see those people inside this conference. Whatever else you can say about Keir Starmer, perhaps it is of note that this time these people are outside the conference.
Interesting, and I'm sure you're right to say that things would be rather different under previous leadership in terms of the protests being inside the conference hall rather than just outside. But having said that, are there many fringe events addressing the issue of Israel, addressing the issue of Israel, Palestine? Are there people with Palestinian flags, Palestinian badges, going out and about, having, protesting? Because this is obviously a hugely hot issue.
Well, we can all remember what happened just yesterday with Rachel Reeves's speech and the protesters that stood up shouting about Gaza, shouting about Israel, shouting about arms sales. There are lots of people wearing lanyards that have Palestinian flags on them. There is a huge amount of debate on this issue, but I have to say I was here in 2019 when you couldn't move for Palestinian flags being waved on the conference floor. I have to say I haven't seen any Palestinian flags in the way that we saw when Jeremy Corbyn was party leader, but lots and lots of lanyards.
We are still looking ahead to Keir Starmer's speech, which will be at about 2 o'clock. Lots of talk about how he's going to try and shift the tone in a more positive direction. Of course, he got quite a bit of criticism following that quite miserable speech, I think it's fair to say, in the Rose Garden a few weeks ago now. What do you expect for this speech?
Well, I have to say the atmosphere in the hall is becoming more... Well, what happens to an atmosphere? Does it thicken? I'm not sure. But I'm going to show you the queue, anyway, of people waiting to get in to Keir Starmer's speech. They've erected barriers here because we've got the number of delegates that are queuing up. It is a ticketed event this year, but nonetheless, the queue is expanding. I might not even be able to squeeze through, but to just give you a scale of the number of people who will be pouring into the hall in not that much time at all, we can sort of walk down and see really stretching for a long, long way. This is the event of conference. It will be the culmination of conference in many ways, and it is what this conference will be judged on. Can the Prime Minister deliver that sense of optimism? Can the Prime Minister answer his critics? Can the Prime Minister turn down this idea of scandal and sleaze and move beyond it and set out a positive vision? These are all questions for his speech today, and that is what all of these people are queuing up to see. Wow. Of course, there are more questions for Keir Starmer as well on the control of the Labour Party. Will we be able to see a speech uninterrupted by hecklers? That would be an interesting case. It actually snakes around here. Let's see if we can step outside. And sorry for the changing lights, but my goodness me, it is a queue and a half, and it will be interesting to see how it goes down in the hall. I've never taken the GB News audience out into this particular corridor before, but it is interesting to see the number of people, the throngs of people here at the Labour Party conference awaiting the speech from a leader who, let's not beat around the bush, has been under pressure in recent days and weeks, who has taken a bit of a dip in the polls, but has this opportunity and an enormous majority to back him up, this opportunity to change perceptions and really make a mark for the start of his premiership. Remember, he's only been in office for the last 2 months or so, just around 70 days, so we haven't even hit that 100-day mark that will always be that moment of judgment. We haven't yet had that first budget. We haven't yet had so much that this government will be trying to achieve in the likely 5 years that it remains in office before the next election. So lots to look forward to. I think we might have found the end of the queue here. So this seems like a perfect moment.
Goodness me, I haven't seen a queue that long since Taylor Swift was in town, or indeed for Boris Johnson either. Let's get the weather. We'll be back in a sec.
A brighter outlook with Box Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Time now for your latest weather update from the Met Office here on GB News. Thankfully, it's a lot drier out there today after the recent downpours. It's not completely dry. We do have some wet weather across northern Scotland, where it's also turned colder. This area of low pressure brought all the heavy rain through the weekend and yesterday, but it is ebbing away. As it pulls away, though, it is allowing the winds to come down from the north, hence why it's so chilly across northern Scotland. We do have some pretty wet weather here too. A few showers over southern Scotland and a scattering over parts of northern England and Wales, Northern Ireland also. But for a good part of England, particularly those flood-affected areas, it should be a dry day. Fairly cloudy, but with a bit of brightness, we could get up into the high teens. So generally fine conditions across much of southern England and the Midlands. Maybe 1 or 2 showers coming into Devon and Cornwall later on. Northern and western parts of Wales will see some sunny spells, but also a few showers here, a scattering of showers over northern England. These showers over the far north of England, southern Scotland, could be on the heavy side, and the heavy and persistent rain this morning over northeast Scotland, that should ease by the end of the day. But look at that wind coming down from the north, bringing that chillier feel, and that colder air will sink further south as we go through the night. Many places will have a dry night. Still a fair few showers around this evening over Wales and northeast England, but they should tend to fade. And then later in the nights we could see thickening cloud into South Wales and southwest England, a bit of showery rain coming in here too. But with clear skies for Northern Ireland and Scotland, temperatures will dip well down into single figures, not far off freezing in parts of Scotland. It won't be as cold in the south because there'll be more cloud coming in here, and that is a sign of more wet weather to come in as we go through tomorrow. Showery rain initially, but turning more persistent come the afternoon over South Wales and southwest England. A few showers over northern England and southern Scotland, but much of the north will have a dry and a fine day tomorrow. We should see some sunny spells, but staying on the chilly side here. Bye for now.
That warm feeling inside from Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
There's an incredible on demand. Good luck.
GB News Breakfast. Every day from 6 a.m.
And feelings of stress and anxiety tend to be quite normal for a lot of kids. And if it's normal for the kids, then it affects the parents as well.
Well, it seems that our canine friends could be the cure after new research by the University of Bristol found that dogs are incredibly sensitive to their owners' emotions.
OK, how do we cheat into this? How can your doggy help your family handle stress during this time of the year? Let's go to the Director of Canine Affairs at Guide Dogs UK, Tim Stafford. Tim, we're talking about this as if it's a big revelation, but obviously, you know, a man like yourself, you're well used to this, and you can see when a dog is reacting. What form would that reaction take, do you think?
Yeah, you know what? It's nice when the science kind of confirms what most of us have known for a very long time. Our dogs become members of our family and they come very, very close to us. So it's no surprise that anything that goes on in the family is going to be detected and picked up by the dog. That can be changes in behaviours. It can certainly be the dogs watching our behaviours and starting to mirror those behaviours. But what this research says is that the dogs can actually smell our emotions. It's not just that they're responding to our behaviour changes, they're responding to our physiological changes as well, because we smell differently when we start to get anxious. So at this time, there's lots of changes in a lot of families' lives. Kids are going back to school, young people are going to university, parents are having to deal with all of the emotions attached to that. So it's no surprise that our dogs start to detect that too.
GB News, the People's Channel.
Good afternoon, Britain. It's 1 o'clock on Tuesday, the 24th of September. I'm Emily Calmer.
And I'm Tom Harwood, live at the Labour Party conference today in Liverpool, where in under an hour's time now, Sir Keir Starmer will be speaking. Stay tuned to hear what the Labour leader and Prime Minister has to say.
We will indeed. And in her speech earlier today, the Home Secretary, Yvette Cooper, she launched a furious attack against the summer rioters, labelling the spate of incidents as arson, racism and thuggery. She also called out the Tories and Reform for apparently making excuses for the rioters. And the National Trust's Director General has admitted that 70% of his staff hate the union flag and are progressive activists. Can that be right? And as ever, please do send your views, post your comments, visit gbnews.com/your say. Tom, thank you very much indeed for showing us that rather long queue for Keir Starmer's speech. I don't think I've ever seen anything like it.
As we're speaking, It looks like the entire Parliamentary Labour Party, just behind the camera, is walking into the hall now. I'm spotting many different MPs. It looks like this is an MPs-only queue.
Can we have a little look?
Currently
Is
just
that
behind
possible?
where our stand is. I don't know if we can have a look. I don't know. Is it possible to turn around these cameras? I'm not sure it is. We're in a fixed position here. But it does look like some of the 411 Labour MPs who were elected just 70 or so days ago are going into the hall as we speak. This is, of course, gearing up for Keir Starmer speaking in around 59 minutes' time. So it does seem that the hall has opened literally as we've just started speaking. So it is all really gearing up here for what will be the moment of conference.
Yes, and those cabinet ministers, they've been having a pretty hard time of it when it comes to the media round, being asked all sorts of questions, being asked to defend Keir Starmer and the various donations, the various freebies, wardrobe gate, all of that. Lord Ali mentioned more times than they would hope for, I imagine. But let's see if this speech turns things around. Tom, we'll catch up later, but let's get the news headlines with Sam Francis.
Very good afternoon to you from the GB newsroom. Just gone 1 o'clock, the top story this lunchtime. The Home Secretary says Labour is the party of law and order, vowing to crack down on street crime, targeting offenders like street drinkers and shoplifters. Opening the third day of the Labour conference in Liverpool this morning, Yvette Cooper pledged to introduce Ronan's Law, banning ninja swords, earning her a standing ovation. She also promised buffer zones around abortion clinics and reiterated Labour's plan to halve knife crime in a decade. She went on to condemn riots in Southport, calling the violence there a disgrace, and also slammed the Conservatives as right-wing wreckers who she said sow division.
So don't anyone tell me that was protest. Don't anyone tell me that was about immigration or policing or poverty. Plenty of people have strong views on immigration, on crime, on the NHS and more, but they don't pick up bricks and throw them at the police. They don't set light to buildings with people inside. It was arson. It was racism. It was thuggery. It was crime.
Well, as we heard from Tom and Emily at the top of the hour, just 57 minutes or so to go until we hear light at the end of the tunnel. That's the message from Sir Keir Starmer as he's preparing for his first Labour conference speech as Prime Minister. He'll outline a vision for national renewal, focusing on faster economic growth, shorter hospital waiting lists and safer streets. But he's also expected to warn of tough pressures ahead. The Labour leader will also pledge a crackdown on benefit fraud, a reduction in net migration and the introduction of a Hillsborough law. The speech comes amid anger, though, over cuts to winter fuel payments and scrutiny of donations to senior Labour figures. Earlier, though, there was disruption at that conference in Liverpool as two Youth Demand supporters spray-painted the words "Genocide Conference" on the entrance. The protesters, calling for an arms embargo on Israel and a halt to new UK oil and gas licences, were later arrested after being tackled by police. The incident happened this morning outside the security check-in at the conference in Liverpool. And some breaking news to bring you that we've heard in the last few minutes that the Defence Secretary, John Healey, has reportedly left that Labour conference early to return to London to chair an emergency Cobra meeting to discuss the escalating crisis in the Middle East. That, of course, comes as Israel airstrikes have continued to hit Hezbollah positions, including missile launchers and weapons depots. At least 550 people, including women and children, have been killed so far in what was Lebanon's deadliest 24 hours in decades. 500,000 people have also fled southern Lebanon. Airlines have cancelled dozens of flights to the region, and Lebanese hospitals are now overwhelmed with more than 1,800 wounded. The UK and the US have also both now advised their nationals to leave the region. And one other line to bring you from the Reuters news agency on that ongoing conflict. We're just hearing that Israeli jets have been seen conducting a targeted strike in the Lebanese capital of Beirut. That, according to the Israeli military. No details, though, so far on the outcome of that latest strike. But it appears the situation continues to escalate. Here, the government says securing an agreement with striking nurses is an essential step to restoring public services after they turned down a 5.5% pay rise. 2/3 of Royal College of Nursing members voted against that deal in a record turnout. Labour Minister Pat McFadden insists the government does understand the challenge of balancing public spending and trying to treat workers fairly.
Prospects for the country are great. Britain's a great place in which to invest, and if we can get that message out and get that going, then we can generate the wealth that we need to make people better off and to fund the public services that we all depend on. And the two parts to that story are going to be at the heart of the Prime Minister's speech this afternoon.
However, the Shadow Health Secretary Victoria Adkins claims the Labour government has, she says, lost control of public sector pay. She also told us earlier pay rises given to junior doctors could have repercussions for other healthcare professionals.
It would have impacts on other healthcare professionals, including nurses and midwives, who would ask quite reasonably, well, what value does this government put on us? And we are now seeing the longer-term consequences of that short-term decision he made in July to award that inflation-busting pay rise to junior doctors with no reform, such as I had with consultants, no improvements to productivity, and sadly, we're now seeing the ramifications of that.
And finally, commuters are bracing for more disruption as dozens of flood warnings remain in place across the UK, with more heavy rain on the way. Some areas have seen more than a month's worth of rain in just 24 hours, leaving homes damaged and roads impassable. A new yellow weather warning's also been issued for Thursday this week, stretching from Nottinghamshire to Northumberland. The Environment Agency has also issued a number of flood warnings. That's the second highest alert level, with strong winds and further travel chaos expected this week. Those are the latest headlines for now. I'll be back with you for another roundup in half an hour.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Good afternoon, Britain, and welcome back. It is now 1:08, and we're going to cross back to Liverpool because GB News political editor Christopher Hope is joined by former Labour MP Sir George Howarth. Christopher, thank you very much indeed. Please do take it away.
Hi, Emily. Yeah, welcome back here to Labour conference in Liverpool. Well, the sun is out outside. It's been pouring with rain over the past 2 days. Finally, the sun has come out. Maybe, just maybe, that's a harbinger for the sunny up plans, which we'll be seeing from Sir Keir Starmer as Prime Minister, his speech shortly. With me now is Sir George Howarth, the former Labour MP who quit in the last election. George, do you want to see some sunny up plans, do you think? Is it been a bit too gloomy for you?
Yes. And I understand why. You know, they've got incredibly difficult problems with public finances, problems with the prisons, and it's all been a bit, oh dear, look at what we've got to deal with, which is fair enough. But I think people are wanting some inspiration. I think Peter Mandelson said over the last 24 hours, you know, people want to see what the project is, what it's going to look like.
Yeah. Tell me a story. What's the narrative behind this new government?
Exactly, yeah. And I think from what I can gather in advance of him actually saying it, it's likely to be that kind of speech. He won't shy away from saying what the problems are, but equally he won't shy away from dealing with them in a way that people, I think, will approve of.
You've been around for a long time, Sir George. Is he political enough for you, Sir Keir Starmer? He's made these little missteps, hasn't he, about freebies and I mean, what's your take on that?
He's not political in the classical sense of somebody who spent all of their life being involved in politics. So, but in the sense that he's got very strong values and a very strong sense of what's right and wrong. Then I think, you know, he is very political in a way that's not flashy, but it's...
He declares everything, he says that, but £100,000 worth of freebies. I mean, do you ever take freebies when you're an MP?
No, but on the other hand, nobody ever offered that.
Should have bought you a drink.
But I mean, one thing I will say, and it's particularly true of his wife, and for that matter, women in the public eye, the media, if they turn up dressed in something that clearly isn't suitable for the occasion, they are going to get whipped by the media. So there is an argument for, if you want to look, if people want you to look your best, then you need, if you're not wealthy as Rishi Sunak was, then, you know, there has to be a way that you can look well.
Sunak didn't need to have donations. He paid for it himself because he was very wealthy, of course.
Yes, exactly.
How are you detecting real upset still about the winter fuel payment being withdrawn in November here in Liverpool? There's anecdotal conversations about last night at an event. Some people, wearing Labour lanyards, told to leave this bar because people here are cross, even now, even in the early days with this Labour government.
Well, I hadn't heard that, and you know, frankly, people need to be more tolerant of different points of view. But I was at a funeral yesterday of an old friend, and as you would expect, most of the other people there were elderly people themselves, and I was surprised that several came up to me and said, "Well, you know what, George, I think it's right. I get it and I don't need it." And I've had a bit of that. So I think maybe the reaction is more about the idea of it than the reality.
Well, perhaps those who are losing it, who are most upset, are the ones complaining about it. And so there might be a majority or others who feel they can live without £300 a year. Maybe.
I mean, it's difficult to say, and I've got no basis for saying that. But on the other hand, I mean, I think he's going to cover the welfare bill.
Yes.
Today.
There'll be cuts to benefits too, won't there?
Yeah. And it is, you know, when you get to the point where I think it's £68 billion.
They can't carry on.
You can't ignore the fact that you can't carry on as was the case before.
The risk for this government, though, is austerity and being seen as Tories in disguise. I can imagine if it goes the wrong way, in a couple of, maybe next year, the year after, that chant, "Are you Tories in disguise?" could be a problem for this government.
Well, some people will say that come what may.
Yes.
But I don't think that is the case. I think, you know, Rachel Reeves, Keir and the team are pushing to get an economy that attracts investment, and through investment they get economic growth. Once you've got economic growth, then spending restrictions and austerity are no longer as relevant as they might be today.
And we heard earlier from Yvette Cooper, the Home Secretary. She wants to cut net migration. I mean, do you think this government understands the concerns about migration, that it's not necessarily a far-right issue, it's a concern held by many people? I mean, I'm sure in Knowsley, in your former seat.
Well, yeah, it is. And I think you've got to be strategic about how you look at where public opinion is. There are people who quite legitimately feel that really there's too many people crossing the channel, and beyond that there's too many people coming into the country, and they're not racists, but they have what they see as a legitimate concern, and that needs to be addressed. Some of it is inspired by racism, and we saw that in the riots, where it might have been some local people involved, but the people who organised it were from the far right. And that's got to be tackled for what it is.
We heard that from the Home Secretary earlier.
Yeah.
But there are underlying issues, and I wonder why we're not hearing more about tackling by the Community Secretary, you know, Angela Rayner, talking to communities. Why are you worried about it? Let's talk about that.
Well, I mean, that's always a good thing. My belief, and I've said this repeatedly over the last few months, I think we need to have a sensible national conversation about immigration, so that we know not only what people think, but so they know what the real implications of it are.
Yeah.
And we're not having that, but we should.
Time for a conversation. Sir George Howarth, former MP for Knowsley, thank you for joining us today on our stand at the Labour Conference for GB News.
My pleasure.
So George Howarth there, at the end now, Emily, saying it's time for a conversation about immigration. We haven't heard that yet from this government.
It's time for a conversation about immigration. Well, thank you very much indeed, Christopher Hope, our political editor, and to Sir George Howarth. Just a few things on that interview, actually. Female politicians can dress appropriately without donations. That was a suggestion from Sir George that women will get harassed by the media if they don't look OK, so therefore it's absolutely fine for female politicians to be taking donations of clothing. And also, I don't know about you, but I'm a bit fed up of hearing people say, oh, well, I know a pensioner who says they don't need the winter fuel allowance, so therefore this is a good policy. No, it's not. You say a couple of months before winter that actually the winter fuel allowance is going to be scrapped for about 10 million pensioners. You don't think some people are going to slip through the cracks there? And also, there's a lot I could say, but we're going to head over to Catherine Forster. Let me know your thoughts on that interview, because Catherine Forster, I believe, is at the queue, because the queue is very long indeed for the Prime Minister's speech, isn't it, Catherine? A huge number of people waiting. It's like he's a rock star.
It is a bit. Hello, Emily. Good afternoon. Yes, there is a real buzz here. I'm going to have to speak quite loudly because it's very, very noisy. I hope you can hear me all right. But hundreds and hundreds of people gathered here waiting for the Prime Minister to speak, beginning at 2 o'clock. Oh, pardon me. I'm just going to grab a gentleman I was just talking to just before we came on air, whose name is Isaac. He's come up from Bournemouth. Isaac, tell us how long you've been a Labour Party member and what you want to hear from the Prime Minister today.
I've been a member since I was about 14 or 15, and it's basically fine. And I hope Keir Starmer says some sort of left-wing stuff that I would agree with. And I'm sure, like you would agree, because like GBNews, I think we all agree that Vladimir Putin, they have him wrong. He's a nice guy. He's funding decent, centrist, centre-right journalism on GBNews. God bless him, I say, right?
Isaac, come on. OK, let's see. We'll see if we can talk to somebody else. Can we ask what you're hoping to hear from the Prime Minister today?
Policies, but can I ask who you are?
We're GBNews.
No.
OK, fair enough.
Good grief.
Who else we could talk to? Hello. Can I ask what you want to hear from the Prime Minister today?
I'm hoping to hear a message of optimism from him, especially on the economy, after Rachel Reeves' excellent speech yesterday.
Do you think that they overdid the doom and the gloom? Do you think it's really important now to give that message of what all the sort of hard choices are going to result in down the line?
I think that it's important to be realistic on the economy, but I do think, I disagree with. I agreed, with what the Chancellor said yesterday. And I look forward to the budget in October.
Are you worried about the optics of all the various donations, given the fact that you're having to make that choice, or the Chancellor says Labour's had to make that choice to take away the winter fuel allowance from a lot of pensioners?
I think... Sorry, could you repeat the question? Sorry, yeah.
The optics of them taking the winter fuel allowance from a lot of pensioners alongside the fact that they've taken donations for pop concerts and football tickets. Do you think that's difficult? Do you think that's cutting through with the public? Do you think that's going to hurt them?
I think as far as the pop tickets and all of that's concerned, the Prime Minister has explained, his reasons for that, and it's not really for me to answer on his behalf as a delegate.
Thank you for talking to us. Enjoy the speech. Thank you. So, we're not popular with everybody here, as you can see, Emily, but it's important that we are here. We are the People's Channel, and a lot of people are very keen to watch us. So back to you now from Liverpool.
Yes, I'm sure that first chap thought he was being very clever indeed with that snarky remark at the top, but there we go. We got to the end there. We got some views. We're going to take a quick break. We'll be back in just a moment. Please do stick with us. We've got lots more coming up on today's show. We're going to be reflecting on what the Home Secretary had to say about the Conservatives and reform.
Nana Queer, weekends from 3 p.m.
Angela, what have we got?
Hello, there's an awful lot, but I think the main interesting thing is that Prince Harry said week or so, 2 weeks ago, I think it was, he absolutely wasn't going to go to his uncle's funeral because there wasn't enough protection for him. His uncle, Lord Fellows, was married to Jane Spencer, who was Diana's sister, who was the most practical and helpful of the three children, the three girls, and she's done an awful lot for Harry. I thought it was just terrible. He wasn't going to go there, but he has been there. They didn't talk to William. William didn't talk to him. Did he get any protection? Who knows? And if he didn't, if he takes the government to court yet again, they would say, well, look, we managed without that, but we don't know about that. But also the paper, the magazine that does loads for Harry and Meghan, they were the ones who said he wasn't going, so they said what he wanted them to say.
He doesn't need any protection. I mean, how did he get there? Probably in a Bombardier private jet that gives off 60 times more carbon than anybody else.
Yes, well, we don't know about that. The good thing was that he was there, and of course today is Remembrance Day for Diana, the day she died. So that he went there and he was with her side of the family, and I think that that's very good and might help him feel a bit better about things.
But neither of them are doing well out of it. William is not doing well out of it. Harry is not doing well out of it. The King is not doing well out of it. Meghan Markle's not doing well out of it. Why can't they just...
No, I don't think it's that easy. I think that they might do much worse if they were together again.
GB News, the People's Channel.
This is Britain's Newsroom, where your voice matters.
It's just astonishing. With expert analysis and honest opinion, we don't just keep you informed.
We bring you unique perspectives you won't see anywhere else.
Can't argue with any of that. When the news happens, it happens here.
On Britain's Newsroom, weekdays from 9:30 a.m.
Only on GB News.
If you want your news to be straight talking...
This is a nightmare for the Conservatives again.
Down to earth.
It's not just Nottingham where this is happening, is it?
And most importantly, honest.
Hard-working, middle-class taxpayers, they'll get their book thrown at them.
Then catch me, Martin Daubney, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
The king of breakfast TV is back. That's right, Britain's favourite TV host, Eamon Holmes, returns to Britain's hottest breakfast programme. Breakfast every day from 6 a.m. only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to Good Afternoon Britain. It is now 1:23. There were rather a lot of unpleasant people in that queue for Keir Starmer, just saying absolutely no, we're not going to talk to GB News, even though they've been given the opportunity to say what they actually want to hear from the Prime Minister of this country. If they cared about democracy, if they cared about politics, surely they want to get that across. But there you go, some people have no manners, clearly. Anyway, in other news, the Home Secretary, Yvette Cooper, says it's time to take our streets back. She addressed concerns on crime at the Labour conference in Liverpool a little bit earlier. She also spoke on the summer riots quite a bit. She described the events as arson, racism and thuggery. She also accused the Conservatives and other right-wing parties of undermining the authority of the police, saying that her party is the party of law and order, where I can speak now with GB News Home and Security Editor Mark White. Mark, I think that was very interesting, actually, what she said, accusing the Conservatives and other right-wing parties of undermining the authority of the police. Was she referring to what we hear from some politicians and commentators and journalists, that there can be a two-tier justice?
Well, certainly that was a big issue of concern for many, and it wasn't right-wing politicians in particular that were raising this issue. There were concerns over the way in which there was a very significant clampdown and severe sentences that were handed down to those involved in the rioting, even right on the fringes of the rioting, not involved in the rioting, but posting messages and alike, and a concern and a conversation around whether that same level of enforcement was being sort of handed down to other sections of the community. But yes, I mean, you'll have to ask her doubling down on its assertions that we heard at the time of the riots, that there was no, as she saw it, no excuse whatsoever, not any underlying issues that could excuse the kind of violence that we were seeing. And understandably, of course, all violence has got to be condemned. But echoing what the Prime Minister has said before, she said this was racism and criminality pure and simple. Have a listen to what she told the conference.
So don't anyone tell me that was protest. Don't anyone tell me that was about immigration or policing or poverty. Plenty of people have strong views on immigration, on crime, on the NHS and more, but they don't pick up bricks and throw them at the police. They don't set light to buildings with people inside. It was arson. It was racism. It was thuggery. It was crime.
So, as I say, you know, Emily, very, condemnatory in what she was saying about those who took to the streets. And, you know, we've been up there, many members of the media from all sides of the spectrum have been up there as well, and have acknowledged that there are some very serious underlying tensions in communities right across the country. And of course, we saw from the subsequent court cases that the vast majority of those that were appearing before the courts were from the local area that the rioting was taking place in, which again was in contrast to what we were hearing from the Prime Minister, saying that this was right-wing groups who were coming up in trains that were involved in the rioting.
Yeah, and she's saying that we need to have a serious conversation about immigration, or at least that the rioters shouldn't get in the way of that, shouldn't silence a serious conversation about immigration. But I'm sure a lot of people will be wondering when that conversation will begin. In other news, Mark, just breaking in the last half an hour or so, the Defence Secretary, he's had to leave the conference early, John Healey, to attend a Cobra meeting. Is that right?
Well, yeah, a very serious situation, of course, unfolding in the Middle East on the Israel-Lebanon border, with Israel now taking the fight to the terrorist group Hezbollah after some 9,000 rockets, drones and missiles were fired at Israel over the last year. Israel clearly and saying as much that enough is enough, and they have to get their communities who have been evacuated from that area of northern Israel, more than 70,000 people for more than a year, back into those communities. But in doing that, of course, that raises the real potential now for a wider regional war. And we've seen just now more missile and rocket attacks into northern Israel from Hezbollah, IDF forces, the Israeli Defence Forces, bombing targets in southern Lebanon. We heard from the Foreign Secretary in recent days urging those British citizens, thousands of them, dual nationals and British citizens that are there, to get out as soon as possible by commercial means, while commercial means are still there. But John Healey, I think, down chairing this Cobra crisis meeting that will bring together ministers, civil servants, members of the armed forces. They'll be working out their next move should there be a civilian evacuation. Well, we've got HMS Duncan, the Type 45 air defence destroyer that's in that region, along with RFA Mounts Bay, a landing support ship. They may be tasked with helping out in a civilian evacuation should the situation worsen.
Very much indeed, Mark White, our Home and Security Editor, for bringing us the very latest. Now, just before we move on, we can see that anticipation is building as Sir Keir Starmer has arrived now at the Labour conference ahead of his speech at 2 o'clock. Yes, I believe we can bring you the latest as it comes in. Here we go. Sir Keir Starmer and Lady Victoria Starmer. They're walking into the conference. Some applause, people with signs saying change begins. It is now Keir Starmer's job to try and put a positive spin on what he has to say to the nation after he's been accused of being a little bit too negative, a little bit talking down this country, a little bit miserable, frankly. So what exactly will he say? We will bring that to you live very shortly indeed. But yes, the Home Secretary, Yvette Cooper, says it's time to take our streets back. She's addressed all the concerns about crime at the Labour conference in Liverpool, but she made no reference to something. She made no reference to why the government have not yet scrapped the Rwanda Act. Now, the Rwanda Act still remains on the statute books months after Sir Keir Starmer said the plan was dead. Why on earth is that so? Well, joining me now to discuss this is GB News national reporter Charlie Peters. Charlie, thank you very much indeed for joining me. This is a bit perplexing, isn't it? Because they've made a whole song and dance of wanting to scrap this evil Rwanda plan that makes no sense in terms of finances or ethics or morals and all of this, but yet it's still on the statute books. I believe we've lost Charlie, which is a real shame. Hopefully we can get him back. We're going to go to the news headlines and then hopefully we'll be able to bring you Charlie.
Very good afternoon to you. It is just after 1:30. The top story this lunchtime, and as we were just hearing, Sir Keir Starmer has arrived to applause from delegates as he prepares for his first Labour conference speech as Prime Minister. That speech, set to begin in now just under half an hour, will aim for an optimistic note, claiming there is light at the end of the tunnel. Starmer will also pledge to crack down on benefit fraud, reduce net migration and introduce a Hillsborough law. Starmer will also pledge to crack down on benefit fraud, reduce net migration and introduce a Hillsborough law. It's so good you've just heard it twice. The speech comes amid anger over cuts to winter fuel payments, though, and scrutiny of donations to senior Labour figures. Well, there's been disruption elsewhere at the Labour Party conference, as two Youth Demand supporters spray-painted the words genocide at the entrance to the conference in Liverpool. The protesters, calling for an arms embargo on Israel and a halt on new UK oil and gas licences, were arrested after being tackled by police. The incident happened this morning outside the security check-in in Liverpool. Israel is ramping up attacks on Hezbollah in Lebanon, with airstrikes and tank fire hitting militants as thousands flee the region. Israel's military chief has said this afternoon that the offensive will continue to intensify today after 1,600 militant targets have already been struck in just the last 24 hours. Hezbollah have responded with rocket attacks on Israeli military sites, including an airfield and an explosives factory. Over 550 people have been killed so far, including 50 children, as Lebanese families have packed highways and started to flee south. Lebanon's government, meanwhile, is setting up 89 shelters for its 26,000 displaced residents. Here, the government says securing an agreement with striking nurses is an essential step to restoring public services after they turned down a 5.5% pay rise. 2/3 of Royal College of Nursing members voted against that deal in a record turnout. Labour Minister Pat McFadden insists the government does understand the challenge of balancing public spending while trying to treat workers fairly. But Shadow Health Secretary Victoria Adkins claims the Labour government has lost control of public sector pay. And finally, a skydiver has pulled off a world-first stunt combining skydiving and surfing in Abu Dhabi. Sebastian Alvarez jumped from a helicopter with a surfboard strapped to his feet, landing directly on the water. Video here shows the incredible feat, with Alvarez releasing his parachute mid-air and riding the waves. The adrenaline junkie called the achievement a lifelong dream, blending his love of both skydiving and surfing. He credited that surfing routes, the perfect wave and the perfect weather made the stunt possible. Those are the latest headlines for now. I may be back with you in half an hour unless I get upstaged by Sir Keir Starmer.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Cheers Britannia Wine Club proudly sponsors the GB News Financial Report.
And before I go, here's a quick look at the markets for you this afternoon. The pound will buy you $1.3374 and €1.2004. The price of gold, £1,966.33 per ounce. And the FTSE 100 is at 8,287 points.
Cheers Britannia Wine Club proudly sponsors the GB News Financial Report.
Time now for your latest weather update from the Met Office here on GB News. Thankfully, it's a lot drier out there today after the recent downpours. It's not completely dry. We do have some wet weather across northern Scotland, where it's also turned colder. This area of low pressure brought all the heavy rain through the weekend and yesterday, but it is ebbing away. As it pulls away, though, it is allowing the winds to come down from the north, hence why it's so chilly across northern Scotland. We do have some pretty wet weather here too. A few showers over southern Scotland and a scattering over parts of northern England and Wales, Northern Ireland also. But for a good part of England, particularly those flood-affected areas, it should be a dry day. Fairly cloudy, but with a bit of brightness, we could get up into the high teens. So generally fine conditions across much of southern England and the Midlands. Maybe one or two showers coming into Devon and Cornwall later on. Northern and western parts of Wales will see some sunny spells, but also a few showers here, a scattering of showers over northern England. These showers over the far north of England, southern Scotland, could be on the heavy side, and the heavy and persistent rain this morning over northeast Scotland, that should ease by the end of the day. But look at that wind coming down from the north, bringing that chillier feel, and that colder air will sink further south as we go through the night. Many places will have a dry night. Still a fair few showers around this evening over Wales and northeast England, but they should tend to fade. And then later in the nights we could see thickening cloud into South Wales and southwest England, a bit of showery rain coming in here too. But with clear skies for Northern Ireland and Scotland, temperatures will dip well down into single figures, not far off freezing in parts of Scotland. It won't be as cold in the south because there'll be more cloud coming in here, and that is a sign of more wet weather to come in as we go through tomorrow. Showery rain initially, but turning more persistent come the afternoon over South Wales and southwest England. A few showers over northern England and southern Scotland, but much of the north will have a dry and a fine day tomorrow. We should see some sunny spells, but staying on the chilly side here. Bye for now.
The latest GB News travel.
Good afternoon to you. Hello again, I'm Jules Buckley. Warwickshire, London Road, the A446 in Wishaw is blocked by Holly Lane. An overturned lorry means it's queuing. Many areas of England still affected, of course, by flooding in Leicestershire between Leicester Road and Blaby and Little Glen Road. The A426 closed both ways and queuing because of flooding. Same issue in Milton Keynes, northbound A5 close to flooding between the Portway roundabout and the Abbey Hill roundabout. And the A421 in Bedfordshire is close for flooding between the A6 at the Marshalls roundabout in Kempston and the M1 junction 13 in Barrowborough. Mandeville Road in Northolt in London, the southbound side shut from Northolt Station to Eastcote Lane in queuing. That's due to a collision there. And Shaw in Wiltshire, Shaw Hill eastbound, the A365 by the Wickley turn-off is blocked and slow. That's due to a bump there.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website, gbnews.com.
Welcome back to Good Afternoon Britain. It is now 1:39. Now, Charlie Peters, our national reporter, he's noticed something that was missing in Yvette Cooper's speech. She made absolutely no reference to why they haven't actually scrapped the Rwanda Act. Apparently, the Rwanda Act still remains on the statute books months after Sir Keir Starmer said that plan was dead in the water. Well, joining me now to discuss this is Charlie Peters himself. Charlie, this is quite perplexing that the Rwanda Act is still on the statute books, despite all the talk of wanting to scrap it ASAP.
Yes, well, it does take a long time, the legislative process for repealing acts of Parliament. So that's perhaps why the government has not yet started it. But Lord Kempsell, a Tory peer in the House of Lords earlier this month, asked the government for an update on when it planned to repeal the Safety of Rwanda Act. If so, when it would kick on with that process. A Labour lord in the Home Office replied later the month saying that the normal process will be underway in due course. But there's been no further update on that front. Now, Lord Kempsell told me that for all the government's criticism, they have not actually abolished it yet, leaving the legislation on the statute statute book. He said there must be a reason for this. And it comes at a time when the Prime Minister, Sir Keir Starmer, has been seen to be flirting with the Italians' Rwanda-style deal with Albania, where Meloni has her own offshore deportation facilities. On that visit, which GB News also attended to Italy earlier this month, he said, "Let's see, it's early days. I'm interested in how that works. I think everybody else is. It's very, very early days." In reaction to this story, I've dug up with the Lord Kempsell, who's passed on the information that the government hasn't gone through with giving information on when it might repeal the Rwanda Act. I also spoke to a couple of migration commentators and experts. Alp Mehmet, who chairs Migration Watch UK, told me that the Labour government will be forced into another offshore deportation plan. He said that so far they've been naive and unprepared. The Home Office did not respond to me when I asked them to give a response to Lord Kempsell's comments.
I mean, Charlie, would it be potentially useful for the Labour government to keep the Rwanda Act on the statute books if they are looking at other sort of third-party arrangements, third-country arrangements for offshore processing or for deportations and the like? I mean, could that be so? Right, I believe we have lost Charlie Peters, so I'll never know the answer to that question, but perhaps that is the case. Perhaps it might be quite useful if they were to pursue a similar policy with a different country. It certainly can't be Rwanda anymore. But we're going to cross back to the Labour Party conference in Liverpool, where Tom Harwood is. And Tom is going to, apparently, I believe so anyway, going to give us a little walkabout at the conference, see what is going on. Tom, are you there for us? Tom, thank you very much, and you were very much
at the Labour Party conference, but I have to disappoint you. I'm not going to do a walkabout.
Oh, no, you're letting me down.
Out. I'm here at the stand.
Well, the stand is fabulous. The stand has been very busy all day, which is fantastic to see. Tell us, we've seen the long meandering queues for Keir Starmer. We've seen a couple of people be rather rude and hostile towards GB News, actually, making some what they appeared to be clever points, but weren't very much. But we did speak to a few people waiting in the queue. They were looking for something a bit more optimistic from the Prime Minister, not sure what to say about Freebie Gate and all of that. But what will Keir Starmer say today? How is he going to change the mood?
Yeah, it's been a bit of a damp conference for several reasons. Number one, it's rained every single day and the delegates have literally been damp trudging around this conference hall. But also, of course, we've seen the scandal that has mired this new government just a couple of months into its time in office, and the polls have turned south. We've seen scandals of donations, of appointments, of all the rest of it. But can Keir Starmer today try and raise the roof? He will certainly be applauded and cheered. That always happens at these leaders' speeches. He might even be heckled a bit. Of course, we saw that yesterday. We saw that in a big way last year when Keir Starmer got doused in glitter at the start of his speech. I'm sure the security will be incredibly tight. This is a ticketed event this year. They've been slowly letting people into the hall for the last half hour or so. But yes, not long now to go. I must mention, however, some of the other bits and bobs at this conference. I've managed to get my hands on a set of top Trump-like cards that have Keir Starmer's top team on them. I wonder if we can show this on the screen here. If we cut to here we go. Here's Rachel Reeves and David Lammy. You can see when they were first elected, their majority, their power rating. Also, we can compare to Keir Starmer here, where you can see his power rating is through the roof. Although some of these cards remind us that the election wasn't all wonderful for the Labour Party. Here is the Health Secretary, Wes Streeting. It shows his majority is just 528. He almost lost his seat in the general election thanks to some Gaza independent candidates. But yes, that's a bit of fun that I thought would be nice to show everyone. There are entire shadow cabinet and many others besides. So if you get bored at Labour conference, you can always play a game of Top Trumps with your favourite Labour character figures.
Well, Tom, seeing as I'm Billy No Mates here in the studio in Paddington, I hope you'll bring me back a pack as a little gift from your ventures to Liverpool. Why not? Why not? I'll be waiting. I'll be waiting and hoping.
Absolutely.
Expectation. Thank you. I hope they're not too expensive. Not too expensive?
I'll tell you the truth, I didn't buy them. So
a freebie?
I don't know. I'll have to. Oh, goodness me, they could have been a freebie. They are made by some sort of PR organisation, public affairs agency. So they could well actually be a freebie. I'll find that out for you.
Well, thank you very much indeed. This is Good Afternoon Britain on GB News. We'll say goodbye to Tom Harwood for now. He'll be back a little bit later. I should just remind you that Keir Starmer will be taking to the stage very shortly indeed. In about 15 minutes or so, I believe he'll be taking to the stage. There'll be a video behind him and then he'll deliver his speech. We'll see how long it is. This is Good Afternoon Britain on GB News. Now, in other news, the National Trust's boss has admitted that 70% of the charity's staff are apparently Union Jack-hating progressive activists. Can that be right? More on that after the break.
GB News Breakfast. Every day from 6 a.m.
I'm not saying I don't want to be a mum, and I'm not saying I don't want to work, but it's definitely not easy.
It's just really tough for us mums, you know? Our job's never done, our work is never finished, and I think it's this movement, the real out-of-office movement, is something that just really resonates with me, and I think we should all talk more about how much work we do. I think a woman's work is never done, but I just think we all feel guilty. We have that mum guilt, you know. If you're working and being successful, you wish you were at home with the kids, and if you're at home, you're thinking, am I doing enough work?
Yeah, and of course the cost of childcare in this country means that a lot of families just frankly make that decision to have one of the parents stay at home, usually the mum, and they're just being squeezed out of the economy, and that's not good either.
Once you've done your job as a working mum, you come home and you're doing another 8 hours on top of it.
Mothers have a tendency, definitely historically, just to crack on with it. It's just something that they are expected to do, that they do without moaning, and now it's like...
Are we getting to a stage where always go down that well?
Yeah.
In my experience, I have had someone say to me, well, if you can't handle it, why do you have kids? You know.
Absolutely, absolutely. And yeah, exactly that. We just need to talk about it, and I think it's healthy, and I think that's the main thing now, that we should be brave enough to be able to say, do you know what, sometimes it's difficult, but I'm really proud to be a working mum, and I tell my daughters that. I work really, really hard, and it's a good work ethic for them, you know, and that's what, you know, this campaign's all about.
Is there some resistance still, do you think, from some parts of society?
I do think there's resistance, and that's what this is about, is to try and get people talking about the fact that it has been awkward in the past, and some people don't understand a working mum's life, and that's why we need to try and talk about it.
GB News, the People's Channel.
The Britain I grew up in was the most peaceful, gentle society that has ever existed. That has been destroyed.
Opinion polls show immigration is the #1 concern to the British public. Are you proud to be British?
Yeah, I'm ever so proud.
My name is Stephen Edgington, and in this documentary, I want to find out how Britain became a nation of immigrants. Immigration, the truth, available at gbnews.com.
Are the newspapers getting you down?
My wife didn't divorce me that month.
Struggling to separate the wheat from the chaff?
I know that it's a bit of a circus at the best of times.
Well, don't worry. Headliners has got you covered. We'll take the burden of reading the day's news, and if we get depressed, who cares? It's an occupational hazard, frankly. That's Headliners on GB News from 11 p.m. till midnight, and the following morning, 5 till 6 a.m. on GB News, the comedy channel. Nah, just kidding. Britain's news channel.
OK, 1:49 is the time, and we are just gearing up for Keir Starmer's speech. But first, the National Trust Director-General has said something rather curious. She's admitted that 70% of the charity's staff are Union Jack-hating progressive activists. Yes, this was speaking at a Labour Party fringe event. The boss of the charity, Hilary McGrady, acknowledged that there was a gap between her staff's views and the views held by the wider public. So was she being honest. Joining me now to discuss this is historian and broadcaster Rafe Hadel-Mankoo, who I believe is with me. Rafe, thank you very much indeed. Can this be true?
Well, Emily, I think this should be declared the year's least surprising statistic. Nobody who's gone to any National Trust property can be surprised that most of their staff are, progressive activists who, dislike the Union flag. The founders of the National Trust and later figures involved in it, like my hero James Lees-Milne, were really motivated by love of nation. But I think that love of nation in the Trust has become actively national self-loathing. And that's really the state of modern Britain. And with the Trust, what we've done is we've actually entrusted our national heritage to those people who actually actively despise our national heritage. And it's, it's utter madness. You might as well just make Jeremy Corbyn the editor of the Jerusalem Post, or get, the monarchy, the Republic anti-monarchy campaign group to organize the coronation, because that's about as logical as this is. It's the only way you can...
They've actually been talking today about how the monarchy apparently costs us all £500 million, which I've never, ever heard before. I was very much of the impression that they brought in more than they took out of the public purse, but that's a discussion for another day. Rafe, has there been a sort of... Has this been intended? Have these people wanted to take over charities like the National Trust for their political ends, or is it just something that happens? Is it just the type of people who work in charities?
This has been part of the long march through the institutions. The National Trust is no different to any of our institutions. I've been saying for a long time on this channel and elsewhere that people need to understand that Britain is now a post-revolutionary society. So the buildings that house our institutions look the same, but the people who now run them bear no comparison to the generations who lovingly built and ran them. They are cuckoos in the nest, and we need to understand that. And of course, once you realize that, of course, that explains completely why, the National Trust and others have crudely tried to denigrate our national heroes and link them and their houses to colonialism and slavery, as they ludicrously tried to do with Sir Winston Churchill and his beloved Chartwell. We see it in the National Trust putting out a calendar which celebrates Hindu and Muslim festivals like Diwali and Ramadan, but it omits all mention of Christmas and Easter. This is clearly
deliberate. Rafe, that can't be true, can it? They had a calendar that had Hindu and Muslim festivals, but not Christian.
You couldn't make this up. It's absolutely true. And I think, the more that people realize that this is just part of that wider culture war, where all of our elites who run these institutions have so little in connection with the people who actually love going to these institutions like the National Trust and so forth. And of course, the people who go to National Trust properties are actually more traditional than even the average person in the British population. And so what we can see here quite clearly is that, all of the polling shows that, 22% of the progressive activists who run places like the Trust like the country, compared to a majority of the British people who love the country. 82%, I think it is, or 85% of progressive activists like those at the Trust think immigration is a great unalloyed good, where actually it's only a minority of the wider public who believe that. And so, of course, when going to a National Trust property used to be an occasion to celebrate and glory in British heritage.
Absolutely, and to see this Director General actually admit this is quite something, actually, Rafe Hadel-Mankoo, that gap there. We'll have to leave it there, but as always, very good to speak to you. This is Good Afternoon Britain on GB News. We've got lots more coming up on today's show. Of course, up next, the Prime Minister, Sir Keir Starmer, will be addressing the Labour conference. There is the conference hall live in Liverpool. We'll be there right away after the weather.
A brighter outlook with Box Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello, welcome to your afternoon weather update from the Met Office here on GB News. Should turn a bit drier for most overnights. Quite a chilly night across the north before further rain returns to southern areas tomorrow. All the heavy rain from the weekend and yesterday from this area of low pressure, that has cleared away and it's been much drier today across England. But we have seen further rain coming in across northern Scotland with a northerly wind, also feeling pretty chilly here. Smattering of showers elsewhere, but they're tending to fade, and many places, as I said, will have a dry night. With clear skies, going to turn quite chilly. The wind's coming down from the north, bringing that colder air, so likely to see a touch of frost, certainly across the mountains of Scotland. Towns and cities holding up a few degrees above freezing, and quite mild again in the south, where there will be quite a lot of cloud. And a bit of a grey start for southern counties of England. There'll be some rain here, and there will be more showers coming in across northern Scotland. But in these central parts, as I said, temperatures are going to be down close to freezing to start Wednesday. Should be some sunshine through the central belt, across southwest Scotland. Fine start for much of Northern Ireland. Just a few showers coming into the north coast. Quite a bit of cloud early on across parts of northern England, and quite a grey start across much of southern England and South Wales. Generally a dry start here, but things will change. As I mentioned at the start, we are going to see more rain pushing back in here as we go through the day, spreading across southwest England quite early on, and then into South Wales and later into the southeast of England and the Midlands. Across much of northern Britain, bar the odd shower here and there, many places actually dry and bright for most of tomorrow, but it will be on the cool side. Temperatures a touch below average, struggling into the teens. Further south, a little bit milder, but with the rain, it won't feel all that pleasant. And we're not done with the rain, far from it. Further heavy and persistent rain to come over parts of northern England, North Wales, Northern Ireland and southern Scotland on Thursday. There's a Met Office warning in place for parts of northeast England where that rain could cause some further disruption. In the south, turning a little brighter and a little milder.
That warm feeling inside from Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
You can be.
Welcome to State of the Nation, daily plunge into the stories shaping our country. I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg, and Monday to Thursday we bring you the insights, the facts, the truth about how our country is being governed. Because what happens in Downing Street matters down your street. Tune in to State of the Nation every Monday to Thursday, 8 to 9 o'clock. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hi there, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm going to take a second to tell you all about my show, Dubes & Co. We start off with the issues of the day. We then bring in both sides of the arguments. We get rid of the disrespect. And then you throw me into the mix. And trust me, I'll tell it exactly how it is. And then, of course, the magic ingredient, you at home. We mix it all together, and what have we got? In my opinion, the best debate show in town. Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Are the newspapers getting you down?
My wife didn't divorce me that month.
Struggling to separate the wheat from the chaff?
I know that it's a bit of a circus at the best of times.
Well, don't worry, Headliners has got you covered. We'll take the burden of reading the day's news, and if we get depressed, who cares? It's an occupational hazard, frankly. That's Headliners on GB News from 11 p.m. till midnight, and the following morning, 5 till 6 a.m. on GB News, the comedy channel. Nah, just kidding. Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, for a frank and honest discussion with those in power that cuts through the spin and gets to the heart of the issues shaping our nation.
You haven't confirmed that you want to stand as leader, but you haven't ruled it out either.
This report basically says that he's not fit to stand trial. Is he indecisive? Incompetent?
I deliver the dose of reality Westminster needs.
That's the Camilla Tominey Show at 9:30 every Sunday on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, Britain. It's 2 o'clock on Tuesday, the 24th of September. I'm Emily Carver.
And I'm Tom Harwood, live at the Labour Party conference, where in the next couple of minutes, the Labour Party leader and now Prime Minister, Sir Keir Starmer, will be speaking. Stay tuned to hear precisely what he has to say.
Yes, as you say, Tom, we are very much gearing up to Keir Starmer's speech. It will be coming in the next couple of minutes. The conference hall must be absolutely packed. There it is. We're looking at those pictures, Tom.
We are indeed. I'm told that there will be a video that plays out before the Prime Minister walks onto that stage. So as soon as that video starts playing, we know we've got 3 or 4 minutes before the Prime Minister starts speaking. And there's been a lot of anticipation in the run-up to this speech. We're expecting the Prime Minister to say something along the lines that there is light at the end of the tunnel. A bit of a turnaround from the rhetoric of doom and gloom we've been hearing for the last couple of months, and instead trying to say that there is a brighter future somewhere, however distant in the future.
It still manages to sound quite negative, though, Tom. You know, there may be people in this country, there may be some people in this country who don't believe they're in a tunnel and don't believe that the Labour government are needed to bring them the light.
No, it's interesting. If you look at consumer confidence, for example, that had been rising and rising and rising month on month on month until data published this month, which actually shows the first sharp fall in consumer confidence. Many economists are pointing to the rhetoric of the Chancellor, the rhetoric of the Prime Minister, to some extent talking down the country and actually damaging economic confidence as a result. Could it be that we might talk ourselves into a downturn? That, some economists believe, is a real risk.
Now, one issue that Keir Starmer has found difficult to talk about is immigration, but you're saying that he is going to be talking about that.
Yes, we expect Keir Starmer to say that he is not content with the current high levels of migration, and we expect him to promise to bring numbers down. Now, obviously, anyone who's seen the trend of the last year or so and the effect of the reforms that Robert Jenrick brought in as immigration minister, immigration is expected to fall very considerably this year anyway. So to that extent, Keir Starmer really doesn't have to change any policy at all. He will benefit from policy that the last government introduced in its last few months in office. So it might be a bit of a statement of the obvious, saying that migration will come down under this government, because frankly, if they're not going to change the policy, it would have come down under any government.
Yes, and Yvette Cooper gave her speech a little bit earlier, and all she mentioned in regards to immigration in terms of getting it down was training young people in this country, which of course would be a fantastic thing, but whether that's really an immigration policy, I don't know. But Tom, of course, there has been quite a lot of negative headlines, I think, to say the least, Tom, not least about the winter fuel allowance, but also about Freebie Gate, Wardrobe Gate, Donor Gate, whatever you want to call it. How much of an issue is that for him?
Yes, I think that will, of course, dog Keir Starmer throughout the conference and indeed throughout the speech. This is the contrast that really the political opponents of the Labour Party have been pressing and pressing and pressing, but not just those outside of the Labour Party. I mean, the Conservative Party, for instance, has a poster campaign throughout Liverpool around this conference pointing out the Labour MPs who voted to cut winter fuel payments. There is also,
Tom,
of course,
I should say we're just looking at the
amount of...
Tom, sorry to just interrupt. We're just looking at the conference hall now. There is a young chap who looks like he's about to introduce Keir Starmer. But we will continue on. We'll continue on till Keir Starmer does arrive. There you go. We can have a little listen, sure.
Should we have a little listen to what he's saying?
Looks very different to mine at my age. My mum left school at 16 and got a job. My dad, he grew up in Ireland. He left school with no qualifications, taking any job he could, working on washing machines and building sites to get by. He migrated to England, and one day he decided to go to night college after a shift. That changed his life. He got his BTECs, he went to university, he got a steady job. And so, when I was growing up, both my parents knew better than anyone else how education can change your life. And they were determined that I would get that chance too. I went to a comprehensive school in a deprived area, and when I started, it was a good school. By the time I left, it was in special measures. Not because the teachers didn't care, they did, but because the government didn't seem to care about kids like us. So when I started at a better sixth form, initially, the idea that I might one day go to university wasn't even in my mind. It was my parents who supported me, encouraged me, and told me anything was possible. Similarly, friends and peers have also gone on to university and become skilled tradespeople. But how many other people didn't know and were never told that there was a world out there that needed their talent? How many people still don't know what they are capable of because their parents never had the chance to find out what they could do, or their grandparents never got the opportunities that they deserved? No one ever stepped in to give them that chance, to break the cycle and to tell them that this country not just wants them, but needs them to succeed. Keir Starmer, our new Prime Minister, he was the first in his family to go to university. Like my dad, he understands how opportunities can transform people's lives and that everyone deserves a chance to find out what they can do, discover what they love, and be respected for what they offer. His Labour government has already started giving people that chance. This short film will show you what they've done so far.
Right, well, this is the warm-up video ahead of Keir Starmer taking to the stage. We just heard from Matthew, who is a Labour voter, telling his story of how he went to a deprived school and he had the idea that one day he would go to university, encouraged by his parents, and that we often hear these stories from individuals in the run-up to a speech like this at a conference. Keir Starmer will be coming onto the stage in just a couple minutes. This is just a little video to give us a taste of what's to come.
Yeah, Emily, I thought it was a strange choice to show someone who actually achieved their dream of going to university, clearly who went to school under the previous government. A lot of independent education analysis said that the Gove reforms were pretty successful,
Keir Starmer is
but
now
here
on
Keir
stage,
Starmer
Tom.
comes.
We must listen.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much, conference. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Matthew, for that introduction. That was really fantastic. You've broken through to university, but you stood on this stage, age 21, to do something you've never done before, and not an easy thing to do. That was fantastic. And thank you, conference. Thank you from the bottom of my heart. Thank you, conference, for everything you have done to fulfil the basic duty of our party, our Clause 1, so we can return this great nation to the service of working people. Thank you, conference. People said we couldn't do it, but we did, and we did it together. And look at this now, a record-breaking conference, the biggest attendance ever in our history. And such a far cry from my first conference speech to a live audience of one. The cameraman, socially distanced in an arts centre in Doncaster. Remember that? Don't worry, most people don't. Not even the cameraman. But I bet you do remember the one the year later conference in Brighton 3 years ago. The turning of the tide, the fight for the heart and soul of this party. People said we were going too far. People said we were going too fast. They didn't want to face the country. They wanted to go back to a comfort zone, take the easier road to nowhere, duck the challenge of change. But we stood firm, conference. We stood together, conference, and we won. So take pride in your victory. Take pride that Labour won in every single region in England. Take pride that Labour won in Wales. Take pride that Labour won in Scotland. But never forget that this opportunity is only here because we changed the party. Country first, party second, that isn't a slogan. It's the foundation of this project, a pact with working people we must fulfill to retain the privilege of serving their interests on economic stability, national security, wealth creation, protecting our borders, rooting out anti-Semitism, standing with NATO and Ukraine. The changes we made are permanent, irreversible, and the work of service never stops. Country first, party second. But conference, for many people in this city, the speech they may remember was the one here 2 years ago, because that's when I promised, or on this stage, that if I ever had the privilege to serve our country as Prime Minister, one of my first acts would be to bring in a Hillsborough law, a duty of candour. A law for Liverpool, a law for the 97, a law that people shouldn't have had to fight so hard to get, that will be delivered by this Labour government. It's also a law for the sub-postmasters in the Horizon scandal, the victims of infected blood, Windrush, Grenfell Tower, and all the countless injustices over the years suffered by working people at the hands of those who were supposed to serve them. Truth and justice concealed behind the closed ranks of the state. And conference, this is the meaning of Clause 1. Because today I can confirm that the duty of candour will apply to public authorities and public servants. The bill will include criminal sanctions, and that the Hillsborough law will be introduced to Parliament before the next anniversary in April. It's work that shows how a government of service must act in everything it does. Our driving purpose, to show to the working people of this country that politics can be a force for good. Politics can be on the side of truth and justice. Politics can secure a better life for your family through the steady but uncompromising work of service. Because service is the responsibility and opportunity of power, the precondition for hope, the bond of respect that can unite a country, bind us to the politics of national renewal. Service doesn't mean we'll get everything right. It doesn't mean everyone will agree. But it does mean we understand that every decision we take together, and that it is our duty to the British people to face up to necessary decisions in their interests. And I mean, conference, you know me by now. So you know all those shouts and bellows, the bad faith advice from people who still hanker for the politics of noisy performance, the weak and cowardly fantasy of populism. It's water off a duck's back. Mere glitter on a shirt cuff. It's never distracted me before, and it won't distract me now. This is a long-term project. I've never pretended otherwise. But conference, make no mistake. The work of change has begun. The patient, calm, determined era of politics as service has begun. Planning reformed, doctors back in theatre, new solar projects, new offshore wind projects, the onshore ban lifted, Great British Energy launched, one-word Ofsted judgments ended, a border security command, a national wealth fund, getting Britain building again, the Renters Reform Bill, stopping no-fault evictions, and the Railway Services Bill, bringing railways back into public ownership. And we're only just getting started. A crackdown on knife crime, a real living wage, a modern industrial strategy, a 10-year plan for our NHS, devolution to our nation's regions and cities, the biggest levelling up of workers' rights in a generation, more teachers, more neighbourhood police, more operations, rebuilding our public services. Change has begun. And every single one a necessary step on a longer journey. 5 national missions that will deliver the higher growth, the safer streets, the cleaner energy, the greater opportunities, the healthier society that I know the British people want and need, the mandate that we won. But also something even more precious. Our economy stabilised, the foundations of this country fixed, Tory rot cleared away. So brick by brick, we can build a new home, a better home, built to last, built with pride, but above all built together, a nation rebalanced so that it once again serves the interests of working people. And through the power unleashed by that process, a renewal of who we are, a country that gives equal voice to every person, a country that won't expect you to change who you are just to get on, a country that doesn't just work for you and your family, but one that recognises you, that sees you and respects you as part of our story, a Britain that belongs to you. Because make no mistake, that is the Britain we are building. Change isn't a few lines on a graph moving in the right direction. Change isn't a good Labour policy or two delivered, while the broader settlement remains untouched. No, change must mean nothing less than national renewal. Not a return to the old ways, nor a new path entirely, but a rediscovery in the full glare of the future of who we are. The trouble is, conference, just as we found with the Labour Party 4 years ago, Britain is no longer sure of itself. Our story is uncertain. The hope beaten out of us. There's pride, of course there is. Pride in our communities especially. And there's respect too, all around the world. Trust me, nobody anywhere doubts that this is a great nation. A nation known for our creativity, our artistic skill, our scientific genius, and of course, our pragmatism. Quality that, combined with the industry and pride of working people, have not just rewritten our own story, but also that of the world. We could do that again. In fact, we must. Technology, climate change, the aging population, the movement of people. This is a time when great forces demand a decisive government prepared to face the future. We can see that again in the Middle East today. So I call again for restraint and de-escalation at the border between Lebanon and Israel. Again, all parties to pull back from the brink. I call again for an immediate ceasefire in Gaza, the return of the sausages, the hostages, and a recommitment to the two-state solution. A recognised Palestinian state alongside a safe and secure Israel. And that's the message I will take to the UN General Assembly when I travel there later today. Alongside our steadfast support for Ukraine in the face of Russian aggression. And in this uncertain world, I also pay tribute to our armed forces for all they do to keep Britain safe. But conference strength in this dangerous world depends on strength at home. And yet look at our country. Look at our country. Do you see a Britain where people feel, with the certainty that they deserve, that the future will be better for their children? Because when I was growing up, that's what we believed. People of a completely ordinary working-class background like mine, we took it for granted. We built our lives around it. But that is not the country we inherited in July. That confidence, that certainty, it's brittle and fragile. And so we have to restore it. That is the mandate we won, the meaning of change. And it all comes back to that question. Can politics be a force for good in people's lives? There's no time to waste wondering why people think politics has failed. We have to show what it can do for their lives. Restore, after 14 years of chaos, faith in the values that have always guided this nation. The stability, moderation, the common sense, keeping a cool head, staying the course, facing the future, the defiance of ambition, the determination of service, and above all, our faith, no matter the challenge, in practical solutions that work, not the easy answers that may well move a crowd, but do not move a nation forward. No conference. We know that way lies ruin. We've seen it in our party, and we changed it. And for 14 years, against our country's best traditions, we've seen it in Britain. And now we must change that too. We must build a new Britain, built from that age-old spirit of creativity and enterprise, the pride and ambition of working people, that when matched by a government of service, a decisive government, A government prepared to use its powers for justice, opportunity and equal respect can deliver a Britain that belongs to you. A Britain that belongs to you because politics sees public service as a privilege, not privilege as an entitlement to public service. A Britain that belongs to you because government is mission-driven and serious, clear, measurable targets, progress displayed publicly, so every single person in this country can judge our performance on actions, not words. A Britain that belongs to you because we maintain our focus at all times on fixing those foundations for working people, those 5 national missions, providing the security and control they need, but also protecting us from the whims of Westminster, making sure that we don't get blown off course. And a Britain that belongs to you because we came together, and together we built it, because this has to be a partnership. We won't achieve our missions alone. I understand the power and responsibility of government, the way it can make or break a life. When you're chief prosecutor, when you look into the eyes of victims who've lost everything, parents whose daughter was raped and murdered, as I did with Penny and John, trust me, you learn about what government can and must do. And I also know from the campaigners who have inspired me, Pooja and Nikita Kanda, Figan Murray, people who fight tirelessly against murder and terrorism so no other family will suffer their awful pain. Nathaniel Dye, who fights for a better NHS so no other person will suffer his fatal late cancer diagnosis. The families and survivors of Grenfell Tower, whose dignity for 7 years held up a mirror to this nation and asked us, do we really give everyone an equal voice? They have all shown that the difference between service and government, true service, is that service must listen to people far beyond the walls of the state and empower them to make our country better. Because trust me, that is without question the quickest way to clear away the Tory rot and build that Britain that belongs to you. And so change begins, because there is another injustice hiding in plain sight in our streets, in every town and city in this country. People who were prepared to make the ultimate sacrifice for our nation, who put their lives on the line to protect all of us, but who will not have a safe place to sleep tonight. We cannot stand by and let this happen anymore. So today I can announce that this government will respect that service. We will repay those who served us and house all veterans in housing need. Homes will be there for heroes. Thank you. And because we've started the hard yards of planning reform, because we're facing up to decisions ignored for years, because we're introducing new planning passports that will turbocharge house building in our inner cities, we can make the very same promise to other people at risk of homelessness. Young care leavers, victims of domestic abuse. They will have the security they deserve. They will have a roof over their head because Britain belongs to them. And another thing, conference, another promise kept. We said GB Energy, our publicly owned national champion, the vehicle that will drive forward our mission on clean energy, we said it belonged in Scotland. And it does. But the truth is, it could only really ever be based in one place in Scotland. So today I can confirm that the future of British energy will be powered, as it has been for decades, by the talent and skills of the working people in the Granite City, with GB Energy based in Aberdeen. This is how the work of change happens. A decisive mission-led government moving our country forward step by step, focused on a long-term plan. That first, we stabilise our economy. Second, we fix the foundation. And third, we build with pride and determination a Britain that belongs to you. But it will be hard. That's not rhetoric. It's reality. It's not just that financial black hole, the £22 billion of unfunded spending commitments, concealed from our country by the Tories. It's not just the societal black hole, our public services decimated, communities held together with little more than goodwill. It's also the political black hole, because the politics of national renewal, they're collective. They involve a shared struggle, a project that says to everyone, this will be tough in the short term, but in the long term, it's the right thing to do for our country, and we all benefit from that. To coin a phrase, we're all in it together. But that's just it, isn't it? People have heard it all before, and they listened. I ran a public service in the early days of austerity. People did everything asked of them to find a way forward. They did it in the pandemic as well, saved the lives of people they will never meet, all while their government broke the very rules that they followed. And so people ask us now, as we seek patience in pursuit of national renewal, what will we get to show for it? I understand that. After all, what they're used to is a lie, an act, a charade, a performance. You may call it populism, many people do. But I prefer to call it the politics of easy answers. Because at its core, that's what it is. A deliberate refusal to countenance tough decisions, because the political pain is just too much. Party first, country second. Take Rwanda, a policy they knew from the beginning would never work, was never supposed to work. £700 million of your money frittered away on something that was never a credible option, because politically it was an easier answer. And just look at the difference you can make if you bring the curtain down on the show. A 23% increase in returns of people who have no right to be here compared with last summer. But it's not just Rwanda. It was the same story on everything. Energy security, the housing crisis, telling people they're tough on crime without building enough prison places. 14 years of performance, 14 years of exploiting problems, not solving them, mining the pits of division, searching them for conflict, fixing your attention on those issues, not on growth, technology, climate change, public services, the ageing population, the cost of living crisis, or any of the challenges that this country desperately needed to face up to. Well, those challenges are still here, Conference, and we are facing up to them. But do not forget what they did, and do not let them attempt to shift the blame, because the state of our country is on them. Why must we release prisoners early? Because the Tories served themselves. Why are our public services on their knees? Because the Tories served themselves. Why is crime routinely unpunished? Our rivers polluted, borders insecure, school roofs crumbling, child poverty rampant. Nothing seems to work. Our public finances broken. Because for 14 years, the Tories performed the politics of easy answers rather than use the power of government to serve our country. Yet still those wounds of trust must be healed. Still that question calls to us. What will we get to show for it? So let me answer that directly and address anyone nervous about the difficult road ahead. Because I know this country is exhausted by and with politics. I know that the cost of living crisis drew a veil over the joy and wonder in our lives, and that people want respite and relief, may even have voted Labour for that reason. So first, let me be clear. Our project has not and never will change. I changed the Labour Party to restore it to the service of working people, and that is exactly what we will do for Britain. But I will not do it with easy answers. I will not do it with false hope. Not now, not ever. That's how we got here in the first place. So I know, after everything you've been through, how hard it is to hear a politician ask for more. But deep down, I think you also know that our country does need a long-term plan and that we can't turn back. The state of our country is real. However, I would also say this. This is a government of service. And that means, whether we agree or not, I will always treat you with the respect of candour, not the distraction of bluster. And the truth is that if we take tough, long-term decisions now, if we stick to the driving purpose behind everything we do, higher economic growth, so living standards rise in every community, our NHS facing the future, waiting lists at your hospital down, safer streets in your community, stronger borders, more opportunities for your children, clean British energy powering your home, then that light at the end of this tunnel, that Britain that belongs to you, we get there much more quickly. And look, I understand that many of the decisions we must take will be unpopular. If they were popular, they'd be easy. But the cost of filling that black hole in our public finances, that will be shared fairly. We will get the welfare build out because we will tackle long-term sickness and support people back to work. We will make every penny work for you because we will root out waste and go over tax avoiders. There will be no stone left unturned, no innovation ignored, no return to Tory austerity. We will rebuild our public service, protect working people, and do this in a Labour way, and that is a promise. And if you can't take that on faith, perhaps because you're concerned about the winter fuel allowance, then I get that. As I say, if this path were popular or easy, we'd have walked it already. But the risk of showing to the world, as the Tories did, that this country does not fund its policies properly, that is a risk we can never take again. Stabilising our economy is the first step of this long-term plan. The only way we keep prices down, cut NHS waiting lists, and secure the triple lock so that every pensioner in this country, every pensioner, will be better off with Labour. But more broadly, I also say this, that as we take on those massive challenges the Tories ignored, the time is long overdue for politicians to level with you about the trade-offs this country faces. Because if the last few years have shown us anything, it's that if you bury your head because things are difficult, your country goes backwards. So if we want justice to be served, some communities must live close to new prisons. If we want to maintain support for the welfare state, then we will legislate to stop benefit fraud, do everything we can to tackle worklessness. If we want cheaper electricity, we need new pylons overground. Otherwise, the burden on taxpayers is too much. If we want home ownership to be a credible aspiration for our children, then every community has a duty to contribute to that purpose. If we want to tackle illegal migration seriously, we can't pretend that there's a magical process that allows you to return people here unlawfully without accepting that process will also grant some people asylum. And if we're serious about levelling up, then we must be proud to be the party of wealth creation, unashamed to partner with the private sector, and perhaps most importantly, that just because we all want low tax and good public services, that does not mean that the iron law of properly funding policies can be ignored. Because it can't. We've seen the damage that that does. And I will not let that happen again. I will not let Tory economic recklessness hold back the working people of this country. And let me tell you something else I won't let happen. I will never let a minority of violent, racist thugs terrorise our communities. Thank you. Look, I have always accepted that concerns about immigration are legitimate. It is, as point of fact, the policy of this government to reduce both net migration and our economic dependency upon it. I have never thought we should be relaxed about some sectors importing labour, when there are millions of young people, ambitious and highly talented, who are desperate to work and contribute to their community. And trust me, there are plenty of examples of apprenticeship starts going down at the very same time that visa application for the same skills are going up. So we will get tough on this. But at the same time, we'll also get our skills system right. We've got to give businesses more flexibility to adapt to real training needs, and also unlock the pride, the ambition, the pull of the badge on the shirt that young people feel when building a future not just for themselves, but for their community. So we will introduce new foundation apprenticeships, rebalance funding in our training system back to young people, align that with what businesses really need. The first step to a youth guarantee that will eradicate inactivity and unemployment for our young people once and for all. But conference, whatever anyone thinks about immigration, I will never accept the argument made not just by the usual suspects, but by people who should have known better, who said that millions of people concerned about immigration are one and the same thing as the people who smashed up businesses, who targeted mosques, attempted to burn refugees, scrawled racist graffiti over walls, Nazi salutes at the cenotaph, attacked NHS nurses, and told people with different coloured skin, people who contribute here, people who grew up here, that they should go home. No. No. No conference. No conference. People concerned about immigration were not doing that because they understand that this country, this democratic country, is built on the rule of law, the ballot box, the common understanding that we debate our differences, we do not settle them with violent thuggery, and racism is vile. Conference. So to those who equivocate about this, I simply say the country sees you and it rejects you. And to those who say that the only way to love your country is to hate your neighbour because they look different, I say not only do we reject you, we know that you will never win, because the British values we stand for, not just the rule of law, but a love for this country and our neighbours, the respect for difference under the same flag that is stronger than bricks, and you know it. It's what you cannot stand about our country, our reasonable, tolerant country, but it's absolutely who we are. No conference. The debate is not about the worth of migrants. That is toxic, and we must move beyond it. It's about control of migration. It's always been about control. That is what people have voted for time and again. And look, they weren't just ignored after Brexit. The Tories gave them the exact opposite. An immigration system deliberately reformed to reduce control. Because in the end, they are the party of the uncontrolled market. Now, don't get me wrong, markets are dynamic. Competition is a vital life force in our economy. This is a Labour Party proud to say that. We work hand in hand with business. But markets don't give you control. That's almost literally their point. So if you want a country with more control, if you want the great forces that affect your community to be better managed, whether that's migration, climate change, law and order, or security at work, then that does mean more decisive government. And that is a Labour government. Taking back control is a Labour argument. It's why I say we're rebalancing our country to serve working people, because this is a question of balance. We can't afford any more polluted rivers. We can't afford any more COVID contracts. We can't afford any more Grenfell Towers. We have to become serious and mission-led, have to put respect and service deep in the bones of our institutions. That's not a debate about investment or reform. It's always been both. But again, I have to warn you, working people do want a more decisive government. They do want us to rebuild our public services. And they do want that to lead to more control in their lives. But their pockets are not deep, not at all. So we have to be a great reforming government. Our NHS reformed so patients have more control over their health. Our energy system reformed so our country has more control over its security. Police and justice reformed so communities have more control of their street. Education reformed so children have more control of their future. And our economy reformed with the unique force that is economic growth, giving every community the breathing space, the calm, the control to focus on the little things they love in life, not the anxiety and insecurity we have now. Because we do need joy. We do need that in our lives. And one place that has always done that for me, Conference, I told you about it last year. It's the Lake District. A place that my mum loved, not just because what it meant to her, her determination to show that she could walk in a place like that, but because of the beauty everywhere. And last year, I took my family to the old cottage where we used to stay as children in the Lake District. We walked up to the cottage, stood outside. It must have looked a little odd. And the couple who live there now, they came out. They were lovely. And when we told them why we were there, they said, well, come inside, go upstairs, take a walk down memory lane. So we did. Came back outside. We're chatting. And then the woman stopped suddenly and said, someone's nicking your car. And I said, no, that's the police moving the car. And that really confused her. Anyway, at this point, her husband comes in and he says, you haven't clocked, have you? He's the leader of the opposition, a politician. And she stopped, smiled, laughed, and said politely, if I'd known you were a politician, I'd have pushed you down the stairs when I had the chance. The beauty of the Lake District and the heart of the British people in a nutshell. But seriously, when you're walking around in a place like the Langdale Valley, when you can see the grass there every bit as green as it was 14 years ago, it's a reminder and an inspiration that yes, things change, and some things need to change, but some things do not. And the joy and wonder of our nation, the spirit of its people, the cleaners, the drivers, small business owners, teachers, teaching assistants, the people who came out and cleaned the streets, the brickies who rebuilt the broken walls in Southport, the backbone of this country. They are just as resilient as they were 14 years ago. And no matter what loudmouths say on social media, their values are the same. So we will turn our collar up and face the storm. We will rise above the challenges that we've inherited. Because this is a country with fairness in the water, that believes in justice, and that wants working people to be respected. And also for opportunities to be there for your children. Because conference, one of the other things that gave me great joy as a kid, as well as the football obviously, was the flute. Don't think you're expecting that, were you? But seriously, the flute gave me so many opportunities. My first ever trip abroad was to Malta with the Croydon Youth Philharmonic Orchestra. And I'm sure everyone here will know the feeling of being drawn in by music, getting lost in something bigger than yourself, or being moved by a book, a painting, a play. Even now, I turn to Beethoven or Brahms in those moments when, how to put it, the reviews aren't so good. I've got Shostakovich lined up for tomorrow. But these early encounters with art and culture, they change us forever. And we are brilliant at them in this country, brilliant. But those opportunities don't go to every child, do they? My brother, who had difficulties learning, he didn't get those opportunities. Every time I achieved something in my life, my dad used to say to me, "Your brother has achieved just as much as you, Keir." And he was right. I still believe that. But this is what we do in this country, isn't it? We elevate the stories of the individuals who go to the Guildhall School of Music, the Prime Minister from a pebble-dash semi, the working class few who do break through the class ceiling. I don't blame anyone for that. I am guilty of it. It gives hope to people. It's important to tell those stories. But it's not everyone, is it? And we must remember everyone, conference, because everyone deserves to light up their lives. And every child deserves the chance to study the creative subjects that widen their horizons, provide skills employers do value, and prepares them for the future, the jobs and the world that they will inherit. But more than that, every child, every person deserves to be respected for the contribution they make. My sister was a care. I think this guy's obviously got a pass from the 2019 conference. We changed the party. While he's been protesting, we've been changing the party. That's why we've got a Labour government. The conference. The point I was making is this: every child, every person deserves to be respected for the contribution they make. My sister was a care worker in the pandemic. she is still a care worker. Work that surely by now we know is so important for the future of this country. So wouldn't it be great, So conference, wouldn't it be great if this was always and also a country where, because of that contribution, that vital life-affirming work, she could walk into any room and instantly command the same respect as the Prime Minister? Because those are my values, that is what I believe, and those are the values of the Britain that we will build. What will people get to show for it? They will get a country with its future back, renewed by respect and service, rebalanced towards the interests of working people, confident in its values and story, because together we took action. Millions who feel better off, without just being told they're better off by politicians, going to the supermarket without a calculator, because the nation's numbers now add up. More money in their pocket to do the things they love. More faith in their public services, because once again, Labour rebuilt them. An NHS facing the future. More security and dignity at work. Town centres thriving. Streets safe. Borders controlled at last. Clean energy harnessed for national renewal. New homes, new towns, new hospitals, roads and schools. A new future for our children. That is what people will get, and mark my words, we will deliver it. People said we couldn't change the party, but we did. People said we wouldn't win across Britain, but we did. People say we can't deliver national renewal, but we can and we will. We will stabilise our economy, clear out the Tory rot, fix the foundation and deliver the mandate of change. A Britain built to last, built with respect, built with pride, because together we have shown that Britain belongs to you. Thank you, conference. Thank you. Thank you, conference. Thank you. Thank you, conference. Thank you.
Well, that was Sir Keir Starmer there with Lady Starmer, and everyone's probably wondering who paid for their clothes. But anyway, a standing ovation at the end there. The Labour conference in Liverpool, Sir Keir Starmer, has to be said, playing to the home gallery, getting a very, very good reception at the end there. So Sir Keir Starmer has been addressing that Labour conference, and in that, there was a slight gaffe. He offered Homes for Heroes a Hillsborough law and demanded the return of sausages from Hamas. So the big question is, was it a banger of a speech, or was there little meat on the bone? Well, if you're just catching up with us, I'll go through some of the top line details. Offered a Hillsborough law, a law of candour supporting people who've been wronged by institutions such as Hillsborough, the tainted blood scandal, and also the post office scandal. A standout line certainly will catch the attention of a lot of GB News viewers. He offered Homes for Heroes, promising to home British veterans who are homeless after their service, pointing out, of course, how important a career of service is. That certainly will land very, very well. Also, talked about turbocharging home building for carers, for domestic abuse survivors. Britain belongs to them. That got a huge round of applause. That was the second biggest round of applause. The biggest round of applause at that conference speech today was when Sir Keir Starmer said, "I will never let a minority of violent, racist thugs terrorise our communities." Of course, talking about the aftermath of the Southport riots and the riots across 7 other working class towns across Britain, echoing the sentiments earlier on of Yvette Cooper, the Home Secretary, who was once again calling those riots racist and divisive. On immigration, was offering some interesting policy about there would still be the need for immigration. We can't pretend we don't. Talking about millions of enthusiastic young immigrant workers are being needed because at the same time, apprenticeships in the skills where we lack are going down. GB Energy, beg your pardon. Chris Hope of GB News yesterday teased this out of the conference. It was announced today that will be based, the future of British energy will be based not only in Scotland, but the granite city of Aberdeen. Aberdeen, the home of GB Energy, turbocharging home building, Hillsborough Law, Homes for Heroes, and lots of talk, as you'd imagine, about the usual lines of 14 years of chaos, working people, the politics and the government of service, fixing the foundations, party first, country second. Populism is the politics of easy answers. I have a long-term plan. Well, let's cross live now to Liverpool, where GB News' presenter Tom Harwood joins me from that Labour Party conference. Tom, welcome to the show. So, Tom, fair to say, received a huge round of applause at the end, apart from the one gaffe about demanding the release of sausages. Seemed to go rather well. Tell me, was it a banger of a speech?
I think if you were to ask people in this hall, they would say it was indeed a banger of a speech. Although, for those that didn't sit through the more than an hour-long speech that the Prime Minister gave there in the hall that's just in front of me, I think people who only see a clip or two, it might well be dogged by that sausage gaffe. But let's get on to the substance, because really this was a policy-heavy speech. In many ways, it echoed a very famous speech given by Gordon Brown in the noughties, where he listed everything that the new Labour government has done. That speech has gone viral within Labour circles in recent years, and it's clear that the Prime Minister, Keir Starmer, was emulating that with the huge list of policies, both things that the government has already done, lifting the ban on onshore wind, introducing a planning passport that they're preparing for, or indeed ending fixed-term tenancy rental agreements, all the rest of it. He listed one after another to increasing applause, although I have to say, interestingly, it was the nationalising the railways line that got that first big cheer from the crowd in the hall. It's interesting, it's the first time a Prime Minister since Harold Wilson has spoken positively in that way about nationalisation. It's certainly a change for the country, and the hall, the party faithful here, seemed to enjoy it. And of course, I was almost worried that this speech didn't have a protester. We were all expecting it, but right at the end, of course, that came true, and it seemed that the Prime Minister expected it as well. He had that, I think it's fair to say, pre-prepared line that the protester had accidentally come when he had a pass for the 2019 conference. Of course, the last conference under Jeremy Corbyn, I was there. It was full of Palestine flags. You didn't see any British flags at all, lots of Palestine flags. It was a very strange conference atmosphere. Well, this year it seems that most of the people who were active at that conference, well, a lot of them are actually outside this conference protesting. Some of them have made it in.
And Tom, as far as the reaction from the parliamentarians goes, Ed Miliband looked a bit glum-faced on the front row, but the rest seemed, I think, more relieved that it had gone without incident. There was no mention, no joking about Free Gear Keir, about where he got his clothes from. All that was kind of airbrushed from history, trying to get down to looking forward. But still, Tom Harwood, quite a lot of looking back, still blaming the Conservatives a lot for the mess that the country's in, the state wherein there are no easy solutions. Tom Harwood, how much longer can he go on blaming the Tories?
It's interesting, isn't it? Some of the biggest rounds of applause were those lines where the Prime Minister said, never again will we go forward with this sort of unfunded spending, and a whole host of things that he said that the previous government did. He criticised Rwanda. He said, never again will the government pretend that you can have a deportation policy that doesn't accept legitimate asylum seekers. There was this list of things that he said, never again, never again, never again, where you had an increasing sort of rounds of applause. It really does go down well in the hall here when he criticises the previous government. Whether it will go down well in the country is another matter. Will that be a sustainable line through to the next general election 5 years away? Well, potentially not. They're going to have to start pointing to more policy successes. And it was clear there were lists of policies, there were lists of new policies as well, and this is what the Labour Party is really going to have to focus on if it is going to win trust, because at the moment, as you rightly say, there is this air of scandal, this air of sleaze around this government. You've mentioned the Prime Minister's suit. I can tell you it's a Paul Smith suit, I've been told, and Lady Starmer is wearing an Edeline Lee dress and shoes. Haven't been able to work out who paid for them though.
Stuff. Now, can I quickly point out, Tom, that there is a tanking popularity in a poll earlier on today, a Savanta poll coming out. The PM's popularity has dropped by 28 points, even amongst his own voters at that recent 2024 July election, that landslide victory. His ratings have plunged from plus 71 to just plus 43. That's his own mob, Tom Harwood. Today was his own crowd. Is there enough, do you think, on the bone here to please the people out there who don't seem to have seen any change since Labour came in, apart from change for the worse, for pensioners, for free gear, for cronyism?
Yeah, it's interesting. He's clearly trying to shore up some of these issues. So, for example, pointing to that new policy on homes for heroes, but not just for veterans, for care leavers, for victims of domestic abuse as well. That's a sort of concrete result of building more homes in this country. He'll try and point to policies like this, where he can say, this change will deliver this outcome. That's clearly the message that has been tried to get across in this speech, but also a philosophical message in this speech when he spoke about taking back control. He said that that was an intrinsically Labour idea, that the market economy doesn't give you control, that the only way to take back control is that the government has more control. I think plenty of people who voted Leave might disagree with him, saying that taking back control is more about individuals having control of their own lives. Clearly, Keir Starmer believes it's about the government having more control. This is a big philosophical battle that will no doubt grow, and whomever the Conservative Party pick to be their leader in the next few weeks will no doubt be having that philosophical ding-dong over the dispatch boxes in the House of Commons. But that is certainly an interesting point of view. It's almost like Keir Starmer, who was once, of course, Mr. Second Referendum, Mr. Arch Remainer, is trying to take on that mantle of take back control and almost redefine it as a socialist idea.
OK, and Tom Harwood, there was a huge round of applause, as I said there, for Sir Keir Starmer calling out, again, what he called a minority of violent racist thugs who terrorised our communities, doubling down on the sentiments by the Home Secretary Yvette Cooper earlier on. And Tom Harwood, a lot of people since those riots, while not in any way pardoning the actions of what happened in those 7 towns across England, they were wondering, is there going to be any period of reflection from the Labour Party, any attempt to understand the underlying reasons behind those riots, any engagement with the communities, as we saw in Tottenham in 2011? That hasn't happened so far, Tom Harwood, and there's little to suggest today that Sir Keir Starmer or Yvette Cooper are in any mood to listen.
Well, the Prime Minister did in his speech talk, of course, about migration, saying that migration, well, the government is going to get tough on this, Keir Starmer's words, but also at the same time talking about training. So I suppose to some extent, that is the government's answer on that issue, although they're not changing any of those laws that were already tightened up under the last government, which should see net migration fall fairly precipitously over the course of this year. Martin, I'm just going to turn to a guest who has magically appeared on the stage here, Barry Gardiner, Labour MP. Thank you so much for joining us here at the GB News stand. What was your big takeaway from Keir Starmer's speech?
I think it was this, that Keir's vision for Britain is a country where people have self-respect and respect each other. And what he talked about was very much this society that's at ease with itself, that knows who it is, and that respects everyone in that society because of their contribution. He spoke of his sister. He spoke of the way in which she, as a care worker, should have equal respect to the Prime Minister, walking into a room commanding equal respect. He spoke of everybody in society being treated with that same sense of dignity. And I think that's a very positive vision for a society which at the moment is troubled, at the moment seems to be more in favour of demanding its own rights than in recognising our collective responsibilities. So I thought it was an important speech in that respect.
It's an interesting point, because when he spoke about that dignity, that respect, that was the moment that a protester, a heckler, stood up and shouted, "What about dignity and respect for the children of Gaza?"
Yeah. Look, there is a place for protest in our democratic policy. And goodness me, in the Labour Party, we're a party that was founded on protest. You know, go back to the Chartist movement, the trade union movement, fighting for rights. But that's not what Keir was talking about. If you respect each other, if you give the other person the dignity that their humanity deserves, then you treat them well. You treat them with dignity and respect. And I think that was what he was about. So it was, I also really enjoyed the part of his speech where he spoke about music.
Yes, it was strange. He talked about was it a flute?
Yes, a flute.
Yes.
And very personal to talk about that as a child, how his first trip abroad had been with the Croydon Philharmonic Youth Orchestra.
Yeah.
But understanding that our cultural values, the arts, something that we excel at in this country, are central to his vision of our society. Again, really important. The music, the universities that we have, you know, we are blessed in this country with an arts, whether it's sculpture, whether it's painting, whether it's poetry and literature and drama, the theatre, whether it's popular music, whether it's classical music, but we have an incredibly vibrant cultural life in this country, and seeing that as part of how we as a country can respect ourselves and, as he said, have fun.
Was this Keir Starmer's attempt to appear more optimistic? He's been incredibly dour over the last 2 months. He's been talking about what a terrible state the country's in. Some economists suggesting that that's part of the reason behind the fall in consumer confidence over the last month or so. Is this Keir Starmer turning a page on being Mr. Gloomy?
Well, look, he was realistic in this speech. And I think it's good that you have a Prime Minister who treats the British public like grown-ups, doesn't try to hide the bad news.
Hang on, he's not treating the British public like grown-ups. He's trying to restrict the amount that grown-ups can decide to smoke or to drink. I mean, he's bringing in all of these different nanny state restrictions on people's lives. That's treating people like children.
Oh, right. Okay, so you, I presume, would reverse the legislation on seatbelts. You would reverse the legislation legislation on crash helmets. You'd reverse the legislation on the smoking ban in places of work. It's not nanny state to insist that public health is important. That's not nanny state. It's understanding that there are public goods in which we all share, and actually we all have a stake in that, because, yes, people who smoke have a freedom to do that within limits, but they don't have a license to inflict their smoke on other people. And when they are then putting that burden on the public resources that we have to treat them when they're ill, as we must, then we have public responsibilities, not just rights. And that, I think, if you remember the start of our conversation, was what I said was so important about Keir's speech.
And if that were true, if it were true that you were only talking about externalities, only second-hand smoke, by the end of this Parliament, there will be adults, 18-year-olds in this country, who are not allowed to buy a cigarette. The next Parliament, there will be 25-year-olds or 23-year-olds, if I do my maths correctly, that aren't able to buy cigarettes. You are phasing in prohibition there. Now, you might say that's the right thing to do. You might say that's good for public health, but it's certainly not treating people like adults.
I disagree. I think actually it's what people have voted for. They knew what the policies were that we were putting forward. So you can't say, well, people may have voted for it, but actually they don't really want it. Actually, the bulk of people are very comfortable with that. They feel that, just as you wouldn't say, well, we should license all Class A drugs. You might say, well, banning Class A substances, that's not treating people as adults. Actually, it is. But it's also recognizing there's something called addiction. And tobacco and nicotine is an addictive substance, just like Class A drugs. So you do have to recognize that sometimes the very smokers that you're talking about themselves, what's their biggest wish? To be able to give up smoking.
Well,
so better that they don't get started.
Barry, when you sat down here, I didn't think we'd end up talking about Class A drugs, but just to move on and just finally...
How many have you had this week?
Oh, very good. Keir Starmer said once that he had a good time at university. I'm not quite sure what he was supposed to mean by that line. But just finally, there was a bit of a slip in the speech from the Prime Minister when he was trying to talk about freeing the hostages in Gaza, and he said freeing the sausages. That